Chapter 1524. Mr. Ao suddenly collapsed, and there were strange cracks on his body. The reason why it was strange was because there was no blood flowing out from the cracks. That was why it was so strange. At this moment, seeing Arya crawling on the ground in a panic, and seeing the dark tunnel behind the giant stone door that was opened, the atmosphere of fear instantly increased. Claudia suddenly woke up and shuddered. In fact, the best decision at this time was to leave this mysterious oasis as soon as possible. Originally, it was very strange for such a lively oasis to appear in the depths of the desert. She had secretly thought of retreating, but when she saw that her new classmate was silent, as if he was thinking about something, she couldn't help but say, "Mr. Ao has become so strange. Maybe it is some kind of virus. But even if it is a virus, there should be blood flowing out from the cracks of the human body. There must be something in here that made all of this seem so unbelievable. How about we don't go in? Oh, this is a good woman. She is right. Don't go in. Don't go in." The red genie's voice was urgent and fast. Not long ago, it was still scolding the woman, but now it was screaming shamelessly. It was probably because it had lost its dignity that it did not care much about things like shame. At this time, Arya actually screamed. He collapsed on the ground, his whole body trembling, and his face was full of fear. He stretched out his trembling finger and pointed at a pile of sand in front of him. The position of the sand. It should be Mr. Ao who was lying on the sand. "I don't know, it's not me. Mr. Ao." His body suddenly scattered and turned into sand. "Arya, your body?" Claudia suddenly opened her eyes wide. My body?" Arya was stunned and looked at his hands subconsciously. When he found that there were cracks on his hands like Mr. Ao2O's, he suddenly stopped breathing. How did this happen? What did I become? What happened to me?" At this time, there were also cracks on Arya's face. He touched his face in horror, but he could not accept that he had become like this. No, 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 no. I don't want to become like this. I don't want. The excessive fear caused Arya's rationality to completely collapse. He scrambled to get up, turn around, and rushed into the dense grass behind him, trying to escape from this place. But before he could go far, his body suddenly shattered, like a sand sculpture that was pushed to the ground. He was right in front of Boss Luo and Claudia. In the end, he turned into a pile of sand on the ground. Claudia gulped and subconsciously took a step back. However, the strength in her legs seemed to have been sucked out. Her legs gave way, and she fell to the ground, unable to think at all. Boss Luo furrowed his brows. At that moment, in his vision, Mr. Otto, who had turned into sand, and Arya did not have any soul spilling out. But they had souls. Arya's was a fake soul. Mr. Otto's was a real soul. From the beginning of contact, Boss Luo could easily distinguish between them in his vision. He could not help but look at the huge temple in front of him. Luocio walked to the huge stone door, thought for a while, and reached out to touch it. Unexpectedly, Claudia suddenly rushed forward and grabbed Boss Luo's arm. "Don't." Just now, Ao had touched this huge rock, which was why his body became like this. There might be something on this huge stone, maybe a mutated fungus or a virus. We don't know. But Arya did not touch this door. Luocio said casually. Claudia said seriously. But he touched Otto's body, so he might be infected. Boss Luo said at this time, "Assuming that your father and Otto really explored this temple in half a year, do you think it is possible that your father also touched this stone?" Claudia was shocked and subconsciously said, "You mean my father didn't go missing, but just like Otto and Arya, turn into a pile of sand?" Boss Luo glanced at Claudia and suddenly said, "Didn't you say that your father went missing for no reason and couldn't be found?" This, Claudia opened her mouth. She seemed to find it difficult to accept such a ridiculous conjecture, or perhaps she was unwilling to accept the conjecture that her father had died and turned into a pile of sand so easily. "Impossible. My father went missing after he came back. Look at Otto, look at Arya. How long has it been since they touched the stone door? So, it's impossible." But from what we know so far, This is the explanation that is most likely to be close to the truth, right? Could it be that it is really like this? Claudia looked as if she had lost her soul and became dejected. She stared blankly at the open passageway and muttered, "Father," he turned into sand. She probably needed some time to digest some things. Boss Luo glanced at Claudia casually and walked to the pile of sand that Mr. Otto turned into. Only the original body turned into sand. As for the clothes and equipment, they did not disappear. Boss Luo found the bag that contained the magic lamp in the sand and immediately heard the red magic lamp's nagging voice. Boss Luo snapped his fingers and the world suddenly became much quieter, but inside the magic lamp, the red magic lamp could not help but cry like a ghost and cry like a wolf. It did not understand why the flame in the magic lamp suddenly became so much stronger. During the time it became a magic lamp spirit, it had never encountered such a strong flame when it tried to break through the restrictions of the magic lamp. Boss Luo naturally could not hear what was going on inside the magic lamp world. He put aside the bag that contained the magic lamp, then squatted down and used his hand to push away the sand on the ground. In the sand, he found a necklace. The pendant seemed to be some kind of ancient jade. It was emerald green in color and polished into the shape of an eye. Boss Luo held the eye-like pendant in his hand and looked at it carefully, the Eye of Horus. Boss Luo had encountered another item that was related to the Eye of Horus. Other than this pendant, the Ring of Horus, a ring that caused the same individual in many subworlds to swap with each other. Luo, you, look in front. Claudia's voice was intermittent, as if she was extremely frightened. Boss Luo turned around and saw light footsteps coming from the dark passage behind the huge stone door. It seemed that something was slowly walking out. Two figures. Their appearances gradually became clearer, so clear that it felt like an illusion. They were even talking to each other. They were clearly Arya and Mr. Otto. Mr. Otto, we finally got out of this damn place. What the hell is this place? Next time, no matter how much money you give me, I will never come to this damn place again. Do you remember what we saw inside? Inside? It seems like, yeah, there are people outside. Mr. Otto, look. Who are you? Arya, who was wearing another set of clothes, looked vigilant. As for Mr. Otto, who was also wearing another set of clothes, he frowned as if he was thinking about something. Claudia, she could only stare at them blankly, as if she had completely stopped thinking. Listening to their conversation, she even had a ridiculous feeling that the two who walked out of the temple were Arya and Mr. Otto from half a year ago. Boss Luo blinked. In his vision, they both had souls, the souls of Arya and Otto. Tell me, who are you people? Why are you here? Arya suddenly raised a pistol in his hand and pointed at Claudia and Boss Luo outside the huge stone door. Why are you following behind us? Compared to this, other than the two of you, no one else came out? Boss Luo asked calmly. The new Arya and Mr. Otto frowned at the same time. Claudia also quietly opened her mouth, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she chose to cooperate silently. Claudia suddenly became less nervous, except that she quietly pinched the corner of her clothes and moved to Luocchio's side. What are you trying to say? Mr. Otto thought for a while and asked. Boss Luo said seriously, a teacher from our school also participated in this archaeological activity. This is the teacher's daughter, and I am her classmate. We followed the clues left by this teacher and came here. Well, then we saw you. Your teacher? Arya couldn't help but ponder, as if he was thinking about the authenticity of these words. Mr. Otto asked indifferently, "What's his name?" Siegiatu. Boss Luo said the name of Claudia's father. Arya was stunned. Then he opened his eyes wide and looked at Claudia in shock. White-skinned girl, you are Mr. Siegiatu's daughter? No matter whether this Arya was real or fake, he was still annoying. Claudia frowned, but still nodded. You know my father's name? Don't you always use your own code name to communicate? This is Mr. Golden Eyes. At this time, Arya put down his pistol and looked at Mr. Otto. Looks like it's true. He called out your unpleasant nickname, Mr. Otto. Mr. Otto didn't say anything. He just shook his head and walked to the side. He looked at the huge temple beside him and fell into deep thought. Arya, who didn't know what was wrong with Mr. Otto, shrugged and walked a few steps forward to Boss Luo and Claudia. "Hey, relax. I won't hurt you," Arya said with a smile. "I'm good friends with your father, Mr. Siejiadu. He gave me a lot of British goods. I like him very much." "Huh." Claudia nodded. She looked at Luo Chio and asked curiously, "You guys should be using code names to contact each other. Why did you know my father's name when I said it?" Arya was stunned and asked curiously, "Is Siejiatu's real name not a code name? If that's the case, Mr. Siejiatu is really an honest person. Well, a good person. I like him even more." Claudia shook her head and asked, "Where's my father?" Arya pointed at the huge stone door behind him and said, "We went in together just now, but I don't know what happened. We came out, well, should be coming out soon." "What did you encounter inside?" Claudia quickly asked. Arya crossed his arms and pondered. After thinking for a while, he finally shook his head and said, "I don't remember. Otto asked me the same question just now, but I can't remember at all. What the hell? I really can't remember." Claudia swallowed and said. She suddenly wrapped her hand with her clothes, then reached out to grab Arya's arm and pinched it. "Little girl, what are you doing? Even if you're Mr. Siejiru's daughter, I won't go easy on you." Claudia acted like she didn't hear it, retracted her arm, and walked quickly to Boss Luo, whispering, "He's real. I can feel his pulse. He's real." Boss Luo nodded, then smiled and said, "The things inside the temple are quite interesting. I want to go in and take a look." "Don't. What if you become like them?" Claudia panicked. Boss Luo suddenly said, "If there's another me that can come out, can you tell, Claudia? This joke isn't funny at all." Claudia stomped her feet. At this moment, Mr. Otto suddenly moved. He looked directly at Arya and said loudly, "Arya, I plan to go in again. If they come out later, you tell them about this. As for these two young people, you stay with them first." After saying that, Mr. Otto walked into the passageway behind the stone door without hesitation. However, his back was nowhere to be seen in an instant. Arya scratched his head, then shrugged helplessly and sat on the ground. He then smiled at Claudia and said, "Little girl, I'm hungry. Did you bring anything to eat? Aren't there a lot of fruits outside? Can't you pick them yourself?" Claudia said in a bad mood. Arya said, When did this happen? I didn't see it when I came in this morning." Claudia opened her mouth. Even though the Arya in front of her was a living person, the more she talked with him and the more she thought about him, the more Claudia felt her heart tremble. Arya just turned into sand. Chapter 1525. But no matter what the origin of this Arya was, in Claudia's heart, there was an absurd wish. She even hoped that her father, Professor Siejiu, would also come out from this huge stone gate. Even if it was only half a year ago, it would be possible. Claudia couldn't help but be shocked by her own thoughts. However, the sudden transformation of Otto and Arya into sand, as well as the reappearance of Otto and Arya from the door, was something that all the knowledge she had learned in the past 20 years couldn't explain. I want to go in and take a look." Claudia, who was still hesitating and even had the thought of retreating, now looked at Boss Luo with a serious face and said, "I have a feeling maybe we can find the truth inside. Aren't you afraid?" Claudia nodded, then shook her head. "I am, but want to know the truth more." Boss Luo bent down and picked up the backpack with the magic lamp. This was Mr. Otto's backpack, the Mr. Otto who had turned into sand. Luocchio suddenly gave the backpack to Claudia. "This is—" Claudia opened it and found that it was the old oil lamp she gave away before. She couldn't help but feel confused. She didn't know what this new classmate meant behind this action. The boss blinked and said, "Maybe when there is danger, you can really summon a spirit." "You." Claudia rolled her eyes. The number of times she rolled her eyes in the past 2 days was probably more than the number of times she rolled her eyes in the past 20 years. But she still silently put the backpack on. Although this idea was very absurd, she didn't know why. The more time they spent together, the more she found that she seemed to believe what Roland said more and more. "You're going in?" Arya, who was picking fruits to eat, saw this and quickly ran back. Don't you want to wait? Your father should be coming out soon, right? He came out a long time ago, Claudia said casually, then ignored Arya and walked into the stone door with Luaccio. Arya was left outside, scratching his head. He didn't know why these people were so persistent to go in. He looked up at this huge temple and only felt an indescribable sense of oppression. He sat on the ground, sitting on a pile of sand. He didn't know why he suddenly became sad, and tears flowed down uncontrollably. Damn it. Boss Luo was still holding the lamp that he took out from nowhere. Although the light's source wasn't strong, it could unexpectedly shine far in the dark tunnel. Silence, repetition, and a dark environment could easily cause one's mind to become tense. Some people said that as long as a normal person was imprisoned in a completely dark room for 3 days and 3 nights, it would be enough to cause a person's mind to be close to breaking down. Claudia was vaguely irritated and subconsciously grabbed Luaccio's arm. Boss Luo, who was already very good at controlling the absolute defense mechanism, let Claudia grab his arm. Feeling the strength of Claudia's fingers, Boss Luo suddenly said, "If you see another version of yourself, what will you do?" Another version of myself? Claudia couldn't help but be startled. But when she thought of Otto and Roland who had turned into sand and reappeared, she felt a chill down her spine. Maybe I will feel fear and even have the thought that I might be an illusion? Boss Luo blinked and asked curiously, "Feel that you are the illusion? Generally speaking, shouldn't you think that the other person is the illusion?" Claudia shrugged. "When I look in the mirror, I often feel like I'm fake. Maybe it's because my way of thinking is different from others. Or maybe it's because of the greater psychological pressure. What about you? If it were you, how would you feel?" "I don't think so," Luocchio said calmly. Claudia opened her mouth and looked at Luocchio with dissatisfaction. "How can it be like that? Only you can ask others, but others can't ask you?" Boss Luo smiled and said indifferently, "Because this assumption won't be true, so I can't predict how I will react to this question when I know it won't be true. Just treat it as if I can answer you." "Rational?" Claudia frowned and sighed. "Speaking of which, you have always been very calm. You are a guy who is more rational than anyone else." Boss Luo said with some yearning, "I also have moments when I'm not rational. I've been like that before." Claudia only took it as the words of a mature person who had experienced a lot. It was like an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life talking about his youth with a calm tone. She suddenly felt that Roland was very similar to Otto, the Otto who had turned into a pile of sand. "If you want to find someone to talk to, Her words were quickly interrupted by Boss Luo. Boss Luo said casually, "We seem to have caught up with the new Mr. Otto." Claudia was startled and looked forward. Indeed, she could vaguely see a figure standing motionlessly. Judging from his clothes, it was indeed the new Mr. Otto from just now. The place where Mr. Otto stood still was an entrance. There was a door. This was a cyan stone door, which was one size smaller than the huge stone door outside. There were many inscriptions on the 2 doors. In addition, there was a huge scale engraved on the door. The pattern divided the 2 doors into 2. Mr. Otto was holding a notebook and recording the inscriptions on the door. He didn't seem to notice that someone had come behind him. What is written on it? Perhaps because she already knew the previous Otto, Claudia couldn't adapt to this Mr. Otto whom she didn't know at all. Therefore, her tone naturally became more casual, unlike that of a stranger. The evil of the world, the good of the world. Otto didn't care about Claudia's tone and said, "Behind the door, there is something to measure good and evil. It is a place of judgment. Sinners shouldn't enter." "Sinners?" Claudia was stunned and just looked at the door in front of her. There was no other passage here. It seemed that only by opening this door could they continue to go deeper. Although this door looked smaller than the huge stone door outside, its quality was obviously not something that ordinary people could push open. Even 8 or 10 adults wouldn't have the strength to do so. Maybe there is some mechanism. Claudia thought for a while, the mechanism that can open this door. Is there a groove here? She pointed at a spot below the left door. There was indeed a groove there, which looked like an eye. Mr. Otto frowned at this time and said, "Legend has it that when Horus and Seth fought, Seth dug out his left eye. What is missing here seems to be Horus' left eye. This should be a shameful thing for the gods. This temple of Horus, the sun god, shouldn't use this kind of prop to open the door." Boss Luo, who didn't know much about the ancient Egyptian civilization, asked curiously, "Who is Seth?" Mr. Ao turned around to take a look, but did not pay any attention to him. He just kept looking at the inscription on the door. Claudia came over and said softly, "Legend has it that Seth is Horus' uncle." There was an 80-year-long battle between them. The ancient Egyptians believed that Seth was the god of the earth, in charge of the desert, storm, and war. He was the god of strength. On the contrary, Horus was the god of the sky. Simply put, Seth and Horus were enemies. But in fact, Seth was also the patron saint of the ancient pharaohs for a long time. Boss Luo nodded, then took out the eye pendant obtained from Otto, who had turned into sand. "You? Where did you get this thing?" Claudia couldn't help but be stunned. Her voice made Mr. Otto look at her subconsciously. When he saw the pendant in Boss Luo's hand, Mr. Otto's expression changed slightly. He quickly walked over and reached out to take the necklace from Luacio's hand. After looking at it carefully, he asked the same question as Claudia. "As far as the current situation is concerned, the important thing is not its origin, but whether it can open this door, right?" Luacio looked at Mr. Otto, who didn't wear any accessories at this time. "Let me do it." Mr. Otto took a deep look at Luacio, then quickly walked to the left door and carefully put the eye pendant in his hand into the groove. It was completely gentle, as if the eye pendant was originally a part of this door. When the pendant was completely inserted, the crack between it and the door disappeared, and it was completely integrated with the door. At this time, a slight vibration began to come from below them. The door in front of them suddenly moved. The two doors closed inwards in an instant, and a strong light shot out from inside. At the same time, a terrifying suction force appeared at this time, directly sucking Luacio, Claudia, and Mr. Otto directly into the door. When the three of them were completely sucked into the huge blue stone door, the door directly closed. She felt the moisture on her lips and even gradually woke up in a trance. The moment she opened her eyes, a figure was in front of her. She couldn't see the figure clearly, but her reaction was unusually quick. She immediately pushed the figure in front of her away, showing an extremely frightened expression. "It's me, Claudia." Boss Luo's voice slowly went deep in her heart and woke her up from some kind of fear. After waking up, Claudia was still sweating all over, and the hot air seemed to be able to roast her internal organs, making her feel uncomfortable. Where is this?" She looked up at the surroundings. There were a lot of yellow buildings, and they were all not tall bungalows. At this time, she seemed to be in an alley between two bungalows, but even though there was shade, there wasn't the slightest feeling of coolness. "It seems to be a city." From Boss Luo's mouth, Claudia heard an answer that made her even more confused. What did he mean by "seems to be a city"? But soon, Claudia understood the true meaning of Boss Luo's words. She got up and walked out of the alley, and the originally quiet environment suddenly became unusually lively. The streets were unusually flat, and there was an endless stream of people. People were talking and walking, the women with children, and the men were doing all kinds of work. Their clothes were the same as the exhibits in the museum that had been passed down to this day. Even the accessories on their bodies were the same. How did we... This was no longer a question of whether she could accept it or not. Facing such a scene, Claudia subconsciously stepped back. How did we suddenly come to this place? Why don't I remember what happened at all? Could it be that we were like Arya and Otto, who also lost the relevant memories? Door. After the door was opened, what happened? She hoped that Luacio behind her could give her an explanation. Boss Luo quickly explained to her, "Don't worry, we didn't lose our memories, but after opening the door, we came to this place. I can guarantee that this process only took a very short time. Of course, you fainted, which took up most of the time. So, that door is actually connected to this space?" Claudia looked up at the sky. The sky was so big that she couldn't see the limit. Such a huge place obviously couldn't be hidden in the temple outside. She could only use the word space to describe this. Have you woken up? At this moment, a figure walked into the alley quickly. Claudia looked back and found that the person was Mr. Otto. She just realized that she didn't see Otto after waking up. At this moment, Mr. Otto changed into a set of clothes that were almost the same as the people outside. Maybe he just changed. Mr. Otto walked over quickly and said in a low voice, "This place is much bigger than I thought. I've asked the people here. Guess what they call this city?" "What is it called?" Claudia asked subconsciously. Mr. Otto said with a serious face, "Heliopolis. Heliopolis City, this place." Claudia was shocked. "What did you say? Heliopolis?" "The legendary sun city. Home of the gods among the ancient Egyptians here." Mr. Otto nodded slowly. At this moment, noises suddenly came from outside the street. The sound was cheering. It seemed that something had happened. They walked out of the alley together, and the people on both sides made way for them. A magnificent motorcade appeared on the street. Soldiers led the way, elephants pulled the carriage, and there were many attendants behind. A young woman with a beautiful figure was sitting on the shelf, pulled by the elephant. "They call her Princess." Hearing the cheers of the people around, Mr. Otto suddenly said in a low voice, "Yamanlana." Claudia was dumbstruck when she saw the woman on the shelf slowly walk past her. The young woman on the shelf looked exactly the same as her. "Princess Yamanlana?" Claudia was lost in thought and couldn't help murmuring, "Me?" Chapter 1526. The princess's team had already left from their eyes, but the people on the street didn't leave because of this. They were still kneeling on the ground, eagerly shouting the princess's name, Yamanlana. Did you see that just now?" Claudia suddenly turned around and looked at Luaccio and Mr. Otto behind her. She looked a little flustered. The princess's appearance? Boss Luo and Mr. Otto nodded almost at the same time. Claudia subconsciously rubbed her head and seemed to be a little unsteady. She whispered, I seem to be a little uncomfortable. Can we find a place to rest first?" Mr. Otto nodded, then took down the bag on his back and opened it in front of them. "I found some clothes, no matter where this place is, and I don't know what dangers there will be here. In short, let's just integrate into this place first. Not only the clothes, but also some of their decorations, and even some things that look like currency. Only God knew how long he had been in a coma, and only God knew where Mr. Ao had gotten these things from." Claudia didn't have time to think about these at this time. She just felt her head was in a mess. She hurriedly walked into the depths of the alley. Seeing Boss Luo and Otto turn around at the same time, she hurriedly changed into the new clothes. When she appeared in front of Boss Luo and Mr. Otto again, Mr. Otto showed a rare smile. "It's really the princess. Please don't joke." She was somewhat unconfident at this time. Joke? But the woman who was cheered and surrounded by the people in the convoy just now was, that place should be the palace of this place. Mr. Otto looked at the huge building at the end of the long street at this time and muttered, "They called this place Heliopolis City, Sun City, but in fact, I have never heard of this Princess Yamanlana in the ancient dynasty. We don't know which dynasty this is, but it's very likely that there are some discrepancies with the history we know." Claudia, whose mind was in a mess, had no time to think about the information given by Mr. Otto. Her mind was in a trance. She was probably still thinking about Princess Yamanlana, who looked exactly like her. When Mr. Ao went out to inquire, "Did you find a place for us to rest temporarily?" Boss Luo suddenly asked, "Come with me." At this time, Mr. Otto said indifferently, "There's an empty house nearby. It doesn't look like it is often occupied. The princess is back. The princess is back." In front of the huge palace gate, the soldiers made way for the princess's convoy to enter through the main gate. The respect the soldiers had for the princess came from the bottom of their hearts, because the princess had always been the guardian of the palace. She had led troops out many times to resist the terrifying beasts in the desert, killing those terrifying creatures time and time again. That was why the kingdom was stable and prosperous today. In the palace, the old king and the ministers of the kingdom had been waiting for a long time. Princess Yamalana was the only descendant of the king, and the ministers of the kingdom all believed that with Princess Yamalana's achievements, she would very likely become the new king, Pharaoh. But there was no such precedent in the past, so they didn't know what the old king was planning. While he was deep in thought, Princess Yamalana, surrounded by her attendants, slowly walked into the hall. At this moment, the king on the throne opened his arms and revealed a satisfied smile. "My daughter, Yamalana, you are the pride of the kingdom. Congratulations, you've once again successfully stopped the invasion of those monsters. I have asked people to prepare a celebration banquet. Tonight will be a happy night. I will let all the people in the city call for you, my daughter." Princess Yamalana looked around at this time, but said in a low voice, "Father, please cancel tonight's celebration banquet. Now is not the time to celebrate." The princess's speech surprised the ministers and also made the king frown. The king was puzzled. "Don't you like the celebration banquet I held for you? The most outstanding men in the kingdom will be at the banquet. I'm going to choose a husband for you tonight." The king's words made the ministers whisper to each other. The princess was indeed at the age of marriage, but the king had never been anxious about this matter. Now that he suddenly mentioned it, it seemed to have revealed a lot of information. At this time, Princess Yamalana said in a low voice, "Father, although we successfully defeated the giant beasts in this expedition, the casualties this time are unprecedented. Not only that, the number of giant beasts this time, even the individual beasts, are far more than before. If the number of giant beasts increases again, and their individual beasts become stronger again, I'm afraid it will be difficult for our soldiers to resist. What the soldiers need is training and sharper weapons. We shouldn't waste our wealth on luxury and pleasure. My daughter, there is no war without death." The king waved his hand at this time and said indifferently, "What you said, the soldiers who came back first have already told me. I think this is the first time the giant beasts attacked with all their strength. After this, they will be greatly weakened, and I'm afraid they won't be able to organize an invasion in a short time. So don't worry." "Father?" Princess Yamalana looked up. At this time, the king waved his hands and said in a low voice, "My daughter, you came back from the original route, and you are physically and mentally exhausted. I allow you to go back and rest, and prepare well for tonight's banquet. I have already asked people to prepare the most beautiful clothes in the kingdom for you. Tonight, you will be the most beautiful woman in the banquet. All the young men will go crazy for you. Go. This is an order." Yes. Princess Yamalana could only leave slowly. After all, he was the king, and he had the highest power, her father. After the princess left, the king also asked the ministers in the hall to leave and go back home to prepare for tonight's banquet. The king himself also returned to his bedroom. During the time when the princess was away, the king had a new concubine, and he doted on her very much, and he would see her every day. "Your Highness, the king is in a hurry to hold this banquet this time. I heard that he wants to find a husband for you at the banquet." Princess Yamalana, who was walking back to her own palace, heard the reminder of the maid beside her and gradually slowed down her pace. She said expressionlessly, "The disaster of the giant beast hasn't been cured yet, and I don't have time to find a husband." The maid lowered her voice and said, "I heard that the king's new concubine seems to be pregnant. The state preceptor said that this will be a prince. But this matter, the king ordered that it must be kept a secret. I heard it from the concubine's servant." Princess Yamalana, who had slowed down her pace, suddenly stopped. At this time, she frowned, and her expression changed a few times. Finally, she said in a low voice, "Is it really the state preceptor's words?" The maid hurriedly said, "I just heard. The state preceptor hasn't appeared in the palace recently, so I couldn't find out. But the state preceptor did come back once about a month ago and then left again." Princess Yamalana nodded. While thinking, she waved her hand and asked the maid to leave. Then she walked into the bathroom. "You stay outside. I want to have a good rest." Then tonight's banquet, Princess Yamalana said indifferently, "Since I'm going to choose a husband for me, it must be someone I like. I like to see if any of the young talents in the city is good enough for me." The maid was stunned, and then she smiled bitterly. She was afraid that those young talents who came with excitement tonight would be unlucky. Princess Yamalana was brave and good at fighting, and she had been learning how to govern the country from the state preceptor since she was a child. She was a person who excelled in both the pen and the sword, and couldn't be compared to those young talents in the city. She hoped that the princess wouldn't embarrass them too much. Then I'll go and prepare a dress for the princess. The maid lowered her head and said, "No need." Princess Yamalana waved her hand and said, "Wipe my armor clean. I'll wear it to the banquet tonight." Oh, the great sun god, when we let the princess get married. The simple condition of the room was beyond Claudia's expectation, but it was much better than sunbathing outside. Mr. Otto was like a local who had lived in this city for a long time. He had successfully bought a lot of things along the way. After arriving at this empty room, he started to make food. Boss Luo found it interesting, so he helped him and asked questions at the same time. Claudia, who felt that the two people's styles were a little strange, rubbed her head hard again. She felt a headache, not only because her head was in a mess, but also because she was surprised that Princess Yamalana had the same appearance as her. In fact, when she woke up in this place, she felt an inexplicable pain in her head from time to time, and she even felt breathless. She always thought that she was suffering from heat stroke, so now she was listless and weak. But there was another incredible thing. She found that she didn't seem to need Mr. Otto's translation, and she could understand the language of the people living in this city as if she was born with it. She once secretly asked her new classmate Luaccio if he could understand the language of these people, and got a positive answer. Claudia swore that she had never come into contact with this language in all her previous education. There were more and more unexplainable things, and her head was getting more and more painful, as if it was going to split open. After a while, something that made Claudia's head hurt even more happened. A guy jumped into this empty room. Yes, he jumped in from the window position. He had tan skin, wore bloomers and a white top, and had an anxious look on his face. The guy who jumped in was now nervously hiding under the window. When he saw 6 pairs of eyes looking at him, he immediately gestured for them to keep quiet. It seemed that someone was chasing him outside the room, but soon he passed by the window. The guy who hid and patted his chest and heaved a long sigh of relief. Mr. Otto frowned and said, "Arya, when did you come in? Didn't I ask you to wait outside? Do I know you? Who is Arya?" The dark-skinned guy stood up at this time, looking at Mr. Otto with a puzzled look, then shook his head, and then walked quickly to Claudia. This guy suddenly tidied up his messy clothes, then knelt down on one knee. "Oh, dear Princess Yamalana, I didn't expect to meet you in this place. It's really my honor. I'm Ibn, and I have admired you for a long time." "Ibn?" Claudia was stunned. Boss Luo blinked, as if he thought of something. Mr. Otto frowned at this time, and then relaxed. Claudia suddenly took a deep breath. She also thought of something. Since there was Princess Yamalana who looked like her, then there was also Ibn who looked exactly like Arya outside. It seemed it was not impossible. She suddenly looked at Mr. Otto and Luaccio. Since there were people who looked the same as her and Arya, would there be people who looked the same as Mr. Ao, Tal, and Luoccio? "Thank you for your respect." Claudia took a deep breath at this time and said with a bitter smile, "But obviously, I'm not the Princess Yamalana you're talking about." "What?" Ibn jumped up at once. "There are actually 2 people who look so similar in the world." Ibn moved closer to Claudia at this time, from left to right. He almost touched her inside and out. "My God, such a magical thing. It's like a miracle. Are you really not Princess Yamalana's twin sister? Why don't we steal the real Princess Yamalana secretly, and then pretend to be her? We could get a lot of wealth." If this guy's skin was not much darker than Arya's outside, and his hair was much longer, he was obviously another Arya, just as friendly, just as shameless. "Mr. Ibn, have you lived here since you were a child?" Boss Luo suddenly asked at this time. "Sir," Ibn unceremoniously grabbed the food made by Mr. Otto at this time, and shook his head and said, "What a strange name. Well, yes, I grew up here since I was a child. People here call me Ibn the Brave Lion. By the way, where do you live? Why have I never seen you before? You look so similar to Princess Yamalana, and you're at this age, There should be people who know about you. We came here from the outside, Mr. Ao said calmly. Because we got lost, we accidentally came here. Ibn suddenly opened his eyes wide. Are there really humans outside? You came here from the outside? How did you escape the attack of the giant beast? My God, is there really a way to the outside? I feel like I'm going to be rich. So, this guy is really not Arya in disguise. Claudia couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 15:27. Giant beast. What kind of giant beast? Hearing this, Mr. Otto's interest was piqued. He immediately asked. Perhaps it was because he was too familiar with Arya's personality. When he saw Ibn who looked exactly like Arya, Mr. Otto immediately tossed out a few coins. Arya liked this thing very much. Obviously, this Ibn in front of him was the same. He caught the coin that Mr. Ao threw to him, chuckled, and said without thinking, in the desert outside Sun City, there are many enormous beasts living in it. These giant beasts, even when they were cubs, were even larger than the strongest lion. Legend has it that the adult giant beasts have the ability to climb over the city wall. They live around the desert, and anyone who wants to pass through the desert will become their food. So no one has ever walked out of this desert, and no outsiders have ever come in. It's the first time I've seen people from the outside. What does it look like outside? Mr. Otto listened and couldn't help but frown. According to what you said, these giant beasts, as long as a dozen of them come to adulthood, I'm afraid the city wall here can't resist at all. How did you survive for so many years? Ibn said, because there is the protection of the sun god here. Those giant beasts can't attack at all. Only on the day of the longest night every year, when the power of the sun god is the weakest, those giant beasts will attack. But every time, they will be repelled. Claudia was already confused. She suddenly found that she seemed to have transmigrated from a normal plane to a strange plane. Giant beasts? The power of the sun god? But Ibn didn't stop talking. When I was young, I heard from the elders that every time the longest night came, this place would be greatly damaged and countless people would die. Until the last 10 years, the days have become better. 10 years ago, Princess Yamalana, who was only 10 years old, led the soldiers to wipe out the giant beasts outside. This is a very effective method. Through this kind of wiping out, it can effectively reduce the number of giant beasts during the longest night. Now, every time when the giant beasts invade during the longest night, we can easily resist them. And that's why we have such a prosperous kingdom now. So Princess Yamalana's reputation in the kingdom is comparable to the pharaoh's, or even higher. Claudia immediately said with disdain, since the princess is so important, you still have a nerve to steal her away? Aliyah shrugged his shoulders and said, as long as we continue to wipe out the ultralisks, we can effectively reduce the number of ultralisks. Even if it's not the princess, it shouldn't matter, right? In this way, it doesn't matter whether there is a princess or not. Maybe our king, the pharaoh, really hopes that someone can steal the princess away. Nonsense. What kind of father would want his daughter to be stolen? Claudia glared at him. Perhaps it was because she was too similar to Princess Yamanlana that Ibn remembered something bad when he was angry. He swallowed his saliva and lowered his head. I'm not talking nonsense. Otherwise, the pharaoh wouldn't be in a hurry to hold a banquet and choose a husband for the princess. Ibn mumbled with his head lowered. I'm not talking nonsense. Otherwise, Pharaoh wouldn't be in a hurry to hold a banquet and choose a husband for the princess. Choose a husband? When did this happen? Claudia asked subconsciously. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt her heart tighten. Tonight, Ibn laughed at this time and said, Princess Yamanlana just came back victorious after wiping out the ultralisks. The pharaoh ordered a celebration banquet tonight and invited all the young talents in the city to attend the banquet in the palace. The purpose is to find a suitable husband for the princess. This is something that the whole city knows. I also plan to sneak into the palace tonight. Maybe I can win the princess's heart and become the prince consort. When she thought of the scene of Princess Yamanlana and Ibn together, Claudia seemed to see Aliyah hugging her and wanting to do something strange. She suddenly jumped up and pointed at Ibn angrily. In your dreams, go to hell. Bastard, you're not the one I want to marry. Ivan sneered at this time. Look carefully, you're much worse than Princess Yamanlana. You look exactly the same, but your temperament is really incomparable. TSK, TSK. Claudia suddenly sneered, took out a pistol from her backpack, pointed it at Aaliyah, Ivan, and pulled the trigger without saying a word. Don't stop me, I won't kill this guy. But if I don't scare him, he won't know how to behave. Ivan immediately hid and screamed. Don't be impulsive. Don't be impulsive. I mean, the princess temperament can't be compared with you at all. You're the princess. You're the princess. I understand. You're really Princess Yamanlana. Artifact. Only Princess Yamanlana has the magic. I know I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. I've seen it before. Damn. Why didn't I think of it? Artifact. I shouldn't have said those words. Your Highness, please spare my life. At this time, Ivan knelt on the ground and began to cry bitterly, which made Claudia embarrassed. She subconsciously put down the pistol. What did you say? Artifact? What artifact? Ivan cried at this time and said, Princess, don't joke anymore. Who doesn't know that only you can use the artifact? The artifact given to you by the sun himself. Artifact. Claudia subconsciously raised the pistol in her hand and said hesitantly, You mean this gun? Ivan quickly nodded and crazily hinted to Claudia if she could put down the artifact first and not point it at him. What's going on? Claudia couldn't help but look at Luaccio and Mr. Ao Ta. Boss Luo thought at this time and said, It seems that if we want to know something, we may need to meet Princess Yamanlana in person. Yes, maybe we can find a clue to leave here. Mr. Ao Ta also nodded. Meet? How do we meet her? Claudia frowned. Boss Luo and Mr. Ao Ta at this time actually stood up at the same time to Ivan, who was kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy. Claudia was stunned and suddenly had a bad feeling in her heart. You don't want to? Boss Luo walked slowly at this time and smiled. It's also my first time doing this kind of thing. I feel that it will be a very good experience. Student Claudia, thank you for your hard work. Don't come over. I'll do it myself. She couldn't help but let out a shrill scream. A huge bathtub with dense mist. Princess Yamanlana, who had an impressive figure, walked slowly at the edge of the bathtub. The water droplets slowly flowed down her smooth back and reached her upturned buttocks. She had finished washing, and the warm water had washed away her tiredness. She walked slowly to the table where the clothes were placed, but she didn't take new clothes. Instead, she picked up another thing, a metal weapon that was placed on top of the clothes and pressed on top of the clothes. The gun was a black pistol. Princess Yamanlana quickly grabbed the pistol, then turned around and made a shooting posture with a very standard movement. Her fingers gently pulled the trigger, and the black pistol made a click sound. The gun was empty. Princess Yamanlana silently took back the pistol. First, she put on the holster, then put the pistol into the holster, and then put on the new clothes. At this time, the maid outside brought in the armor that Princess Yamanlana ordered before she went into the bath. This was the armor that the princess would wear every time she went to war. This time, when she came back from the war, it was stained with blood, but now was obviously cleaned. Princess Yamanlana put on the armor with the help of the maid, and then asked indifferently, How's the banquet preparation? The maid quickly replied, It's almost ready. Some ministers have even brought their children here early, and now they are arranged to rest in the palace outside. Princess, do you want to observe these young talents before you start? No, Princess Yamanlana said indifferently. I want to go to the temple first. The temple? Now. The maid couldn't help being surprised. But the banquet? After the banquet starts, I'll be there. Princess Yamanlana waved her hand. Anyway, before the banquet starts, Father must have a candidate in mind, right? But the maid seemed to be hesitating. But if you want to enter the temple, except for the time of sacrifice, you need the king's permission. As long as you don't say it, who will know? Princess Yamanlana looked at her maid and suddenly smiled. You will keep it a secret from me, right? Of course. The maid quickly lowered her head, not daring to look directly into Princess Yamanlana's eyes. I'm absolutely loyal to the princess. That's good. Then, the maid only heard the footsteps of Princess Yamanlana leaving. Until Princess Yamanlana was completely gone, the maid dared to raise her head, and she was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. Many times, she even felt that the princess's gaze was much more terrifying than that of the pharaoh when he was angry. When she was 10 years old, she led an army to wipe out the giant beasts. In the past 10 years, no one knew how many giant beasts had died in the hands of this princess. The murderous aura naturally emitted from her body was something that ordinary people couldn't bear. Even so, after hesitating for a while, the maid finally gritted her teeth and then quickly left the bathing pool and walked toward the palace of the pharaoh. But just as she walked out of the bathing pool, her body instantly fell to the ground. Before she fell, there was a sound. A gunshot. The maid who fell to the ground had a finger-sized hole on her forehead, but there wasn't much blood flowing out. Instead, the maid's face suddenly cracked open from the wound. The crack began to spread all over her body. In the blink of an eye, the maid's body was completely shattered and turned into a pile of sand on the ground. In the distance, Princess Yamanlana turned around without even looking at her. When she turned around, her cloak fluttered. "I feel that we are too reckless. What if we are discovered? What should we do?" At this time, Claudia felt that her legs were a little soft, not the kind of soft feeling when someone touched and played with her inner thighs, but the kind of soft feeling when it was difficult to walk and her legs were trembling. So, are you Princess Yamanlana or not? At this time, Ivan also felt that his legs were a little soft, not the kind of soft feeling when someone stabbed him with something hard in the back, but the kind of soft feeling when he was trembling and scared. "Haven't we successfully come in?" Mr. Otto said lightly. He was wearing the guard's uniform in the palace. Ivan and Boss Luo were also wearing the guard's uniform. Mr. Otto got them back after he went out for a while. God knows how he got them back. She always felt that after he came to the City of the Sun, he was like a fish in the sea and could do everything easily. That's true. Claudia was still somewhat conflicted. She recalled how she almost gave herself away when she walked into the palace through the eyes of the guards. Her heart was still thumping wildly at this moment. Remember, you are Princess Yamanlana now. Your eyes and your words can decide the life and death of these soldiers and servants. Mr. Otto said indifferently, "So, you don't need to be afraid of everything here. It's them who are afraid of you. Why do I feel that you are very skilled when you do these things?" Claudia couldn't help but frown. Mr. Otto laughed it off. Now the sun was setting in the west, and the sky had turned yellow. Seeing that the sun was about to disappear, the banquet in the palace at night had entered the preparation stage. Perhaps because it was a celebration at night, all the servants in the palace were busy. The security was not as strict as imagined. In fact, the security of the palace was not strict at all. Maybe it was because the kingdom had always been threatened by the giant beasts in the desert, and in the kingdom, except for creatures like thieves, it had always been as peaceful as the kingdom of heaven. We sneaked into the palace. Then the question is... Claudia looked at the man in front of her solemnly. "Do you know how we can find Princess Yamanlana?" Ivan said he didn't know, and crazily hinted to everyone that since they had sneaked in, they could let him go, and he would never tell on them. Mr. Otto was more direct. He directly knocked Ivan unconscious on the ground, took off his clothes, and hid him in a big vat, then said indifferently, "We don't need to find her. We just need to wait for her to come to us. Since this banquet is held for the princess, we just need to go to the banquet venue." Boss Luo said, "There seems to be some time before the banquet. Can he walk around?" "Walk your ass. Don't walk around." Claudia suddenly put her hands on her waist and said fiercely, very fierce. Chapter 1528. Under normal circumstances, if Boss Luo wanted to go shopping, he would not be stopped. No one could stop him. So as they walked, Claudia and Mr. Ao were suddenly separated from Boss Luo. After a while, Claudia realized that Luaccio, who was beside her, was missing. "When did you get lost?" Only she and Mr. Ao were left. Claudia's tone was somewhat unfriendly and even guarded. Mr. Ao, who was asked this question, frowned at this time. Apparently, he was seriously thinking about this question. He recalled the details along the way. Since they knocked Ibn out and hid him, they followed several servants and wanted to go to the banquet in the palace. During this process, he actually talked with Luaccio. Luaccio even asked him a few questions seemingly casually. For example, he asked if he knew about the Gospel of Judas and what he thought about it. Although Mr. Aota'a was curious about why this young man suddenly asked these questions, he simply said some words that Claudia had heard before on the way to the oasis. But this conversation was almost the same as when they were walking in the oasis. Claudia couldn't figure out why Luaccio asked again, but the memory seemed to have stopped here. After the question, it seemed that they didn't notice the existence of Boss Luo anymore. Until now, they didn't even know when they lost him. There is no other way. Mr. Otto quickly made a decision. Our goal is to find Princess Yamalana, and he knows that. Instead of looking for him, it's better to go to the banquet directly. There's a high chance that we'll meet him there. That's the only way. Claudia shook her head. She felt that after Luaccio was not around, the uneasiness in her heart suddenly increased to the max. She subconsciously moved away from Mr. Aota'a by more than one step. At this time, "Your Highness," a young man who was dressed up shouted from afar with a face full of surprise. At this time, the young man quickly walked over. "I didn't expect to see you so soon. Your Highness Princess Yamanlana." Claudia cursed in her heart, but at this moment, she recalled what Mr. Otto had said before. She could only bite the bullet and pretend to be cold as she replied expressionlessly. "Who are you?" Claudia asked indifferently. "Have I ever seen you before? I am the son of the Minister of Agriculture. Your Highness, you can call me Mani." At this time, the young man introduced himself enthusiastically and said that he specially came to attend the banquet today. "Oh, really?" Claudia nodded. "I was planning to go to the banquet as well. Since we've met, let's go together." How could Moni, the son of the Minister of Agriculture, say no? He was instantly overjoyed and walked in front with his head held high, feeling as if he was walking on the path to the peak of his life. On the other hand, Claudia felt as though she was walking on a path of no return. Once her fake identity was exposed, she didn't know if she could even kill her way out of the banquet hall with the weapons in her hands, let alone charge out of the palace. Strictly speaking, the temple and the palace of the entire city of the sun seemed to be one. The temple was in the deepest part of the palace, and the palace was actually built according to the location of the temple. Only the members of the royal family were qualified to enter the temple through various checks. As the most famous member of the royal family, Princess Yamanlana naturally recognized the guards along the way, so she was unimpeded all the way. Although they were guards, in fact, these guards were not under the management of the palace. They were subordinate to the temple, and only the pharaoh of the kingdom and the high priest of the temple could order them. Basically, the high priest's order was superior to that of the pharaoh of the kingdom. The reason why Princess Yamanlana was unimpeded all the way was naturally because of the artifact in her hand. This was given to Princess Yamanlana by the god of sun himself. For the guards of the temple, it was no different from a holy object. Naturally, Princess Yamanlana was equivalent to a saintess to them, an agent chosen by their true god to enter the human world. How could the guards of the temple stop the saintess of the temple, as long as the saintess could appear here? Where's the high priest? Princess Yamanlana, who had completely entered the temple, met a priest and asked directly. The priest replied, "After entering the palace more than a month ago, the high priest didn't come back. He just said that he had to go on a long journey, but he would come back on the day when the night was the longest." The high priest was the national master of the kingdom, and also the teacher of Princess Yamanlana since she was a child. Princess Yamanlana nodded slightly and waved her hand to let the priest go. Interestingly, as a saintess, her power in the temple was even greater than that of the pharaoh of the kingdom. But as a princess, she couldn't enter the temple at will. Of course, if she wanted to enter the temple, the pharaoh of the kingdom couldn't stop her. This was the relationship between the pharaoh of the kingdom and the princess. Princess Yamanlana walked into the room of gods alone. It was the place where the high priest listened to the oracles of the true God. Only those who were chosen by the true God could have the ability to communicate with it directly. Although Princess Yamanlana was given an artifact by the true God, she actually didn't know whether she was really chosen by the true God. She could only listen to the voice of the true God, occasionally and unilaterally. The Room of Gods wasn't a luxurious place. It was just a dim and narrow stone room. There wasn't even any decoration here, and there was no place to sit. But when Princess Yamanlana walked into the Room of Gods, the whole simple stone room was suffused with an orange-red light. It wasn't strong, just like the afterglow of the sunset. The princess knelt down on one knee and prayed piously. After a while, she stood up and raised her head, saying, "Great God of the sun, why don't you guide me?" The speed of reproduction of the desert beasts is faster than before. If it goes on like this, the next time the longest night comes, I'm afraid that the Sun City won't be able to defend itself. The stone room was so quiet that Princess Yamanlana seemed to be able to hear her own heartbeat. The true God didn't take the initiative to answer her question. Princess Yamanlana waited for a long time and finally sighed slowly. She lowered her head in disappointment and finally knelt down on the ground and prayed piously again. After doing all this, Princess Yamanlana walked to the wall in front of the stone room with a solemn face and reached out to press a brick in the middle. The brick sank into the wall, and at the same time, another part of the wall opened instantly. The wall that was turned over was obviously a stone shelf. Princess Yamanlana walked quickly to the front of the stone shelf and glanced at the shelf. She reached out and took out a box from the shelf. There were 3 similar boxes on the stone shelf at this time. Princess Yamanlana opened the box in her hand, looked at the things inside, and sighed, saying, "Is this all that's left? Bullets!" The box was full of bullets. Taking a deep breath, the princess quickly calmed down and quickly took out some bullets from the box, and then took out the artifact that she kept close to her body from her clothes, and then skillfully loaded the bullets into the pistol. When she left the Room of Gods, the Room of Gods had returned to its original appearance. Princess Yamanlana left the Room of Gods and walked alone in the empty temple. Seeing the afterglow of the setting sun had scattered into the temple, the princess couldn't help but frown. The sunset is coming soon again. Maybe I should once again. Princess Yamanlana soon left the temple and returned to the palace. But she didn't want to go to the banquet immediately, so she walked alone in the courtyard of the palace. While walking, Princess Yamanlana suddenly frowned, because she seemed to feel that there seemed to be someone looking at her from behind a tree. "Who's there? Come out." Princess Yamanlana, who was brave and good at fighting and had been practicing martial arts since she was a child, suddenly turned around and smoothly took out the artifact that was hidden on her body. The princess was even startled at this time. She didn't even realize that someone was so close to her, and she didn't even notice it until it was so close to her. At this time, a figure slowly walked out from behind the tree. Under the afterglow of the sunset, this figure slowly became clear in Princess Yamanlana's eyes. He had a smile that she had never seen before, one that was as pure as a cloudless sky. There was even a little bird perched on his shoulder. Holy ibis, which was regarded as a sacred bird in the city of the sun. The princess couldn't help but frown. She knew that this sacred bird didn't like to come into contact with humans. Only a small number of holy ibis were kept in captivity in the palace, and they usually lived in the courtyard of the palace near the temple. The person in front of her looked very young, and he was wearing the uniform of a palace guard. Obviously, he wasn't a guard of the temple. At this time, facing Princess Yamanlana, who was ready to fight, the guard just blinked his eyes and curiously stared at the artifact, the pistol in the princess' hand. The guard said curiously at this time, "Is this the so-called artifact given by the true God? You don't know who I am?" Princess Yamanlana frowned, feeling that this guard's attitude was too weird. Every guard who saw her was in awe and trepidation. Is he new here? No. Since he knows the artifact, he should know who I am. Princess Yamanlana, I know. The guard nodded. I saw your triumphant return just now. It was so beautiful. Princess Yamanlana frowned again, because this young guard didn't care about her at all, and even spoke in a frivolous tone. She snorted, but slowly took back the artifact in her hand. The education she received since childhood made her not use her royal power to bully a small guard. But the guard who didn't respect her made the princess feel uncomfortable. "Are you new here?" The princess asked coldly. "Why haven't I seen you before?" The guard said sincerely, "I'm new here indeed. I'm not even familiar with the roads here. If this is a place where I shouldn't be, I'll leave immediately. Please don't worry." What's wrong with this guard? Is this the attitude he should have when meeting a member of the royal family? It was only because he met a princess like her that she often stayed in the military camp with the soldiers and had a mysterious experience that she didn't particularly care about social class. If it was any other royal family, they would have already punished this guard who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. It's not about whether you should be here or not. At this time, Her Royal Highness said indifferently, "But as a guard, instead of properly patrolling and guarding the palace, you came here to stroll. This is suspected of being lazy. Don't you know? Isn't this too strict? He's just a newcomer. Maybe the head of the guards hasn't had time to tell him the rules here." "I see." The guard nodded. "It's my fault. I'll leave immediately. Don't worry, Your Highness." Princess Yamanlana shook her head. She didn't want to argue with such a simple-minded guy. When she was about to wave her hand to let the newcomer leave, the princess took a look at the young holy ibis standing on the shoulder of the newcomer. What's wrong with this holy ibis? It has been standing on the shoulder of the newcomer for a long time, without leaving. Princess Yamanlana couldn't help but take a few more glances. "Huh, it's injured?" Princess Yamanlana suddenly noticed that the wings of this holy ibis seemed to have been bandaged. The guard nodded and said, "When I came here, I saw that its wings were injured, and it was leaning against a tree alone. You bandaged it?" The princess had already walked to the side of the guard and directly reached out her hand to take this holy ibis down from the shoulder of the guard. The holy ibis looked very docile in the hands of the princess. "Just a simple bandage," the guard said casually. "I'm afraid that it will leave a wound in the future, but it shouldn't affect its flight. I'm quite confident in bandaging wounds, so don't worry, Your Highness." The holy ibis rarely touch others. Princess Yamanlana suddenly glanced at this young guard and said meaningfully, "They can distinguish between those who are malicious and those who are kind. They're the sacred birds of the City of the Sun. It's still young, maybe it can't tell." Unexpectedly, the guard said carelessly. Princess Yamanlana shook her head. She felt that this guard was very different from the other guards in the palace, so she asked directly, "What's your name?" "Ivan." "Ivan?" Princess Yamanlana nodded, then bent down, put down the holy ibis in her hands, and let it slowly walk into the grass in the courtyard. Then she said indifferently, "I like you very much. You can follow me in the future. Your Highness, I'm new here, so I'm afraid that I don't understand a lot of things." The guard shook his head. The princess, who didn't expect to be rejected, snorted coldly, and a murderous aura that she had accumulated from fighting the giant beast for 10 years was overflowing. "I am the princess, and my words are orders. If you don't understand, then learn from me. Follow me." After saying that, the princess waved her sleeves and walked straight ahead. Chapter 1529. The palace of the City of the Sun was not as large as it looked, because a considerable part of the land belonged to the temple. But even so, the palace was obviously not small. The guard followed Princess Yamana all the way, and it took about 20 minutes to finish the transition area between the temple and the palace. During this period, Princess Yamana didn't even turn around to say a word to the guard behind her. She didn't know what to say. Princess Yamana was a person who liked to reflect. At this time, she was reflecting on her behavior just now, which seemed to be a bit too reckless. Of course, if it were another royal family, they probably wouldn't take such a trivial matter to heart. But Princess Yamana knew that if she wanted to be a wise ruler, she couldn't abuse her power. All power needed to serve the kingdom and the people so that the country could last for a long time. Princess Yamana was very strict in governing the army, and she was also very strict in monitoring the ministers of the various systems in the kingdom. She was even very strict with herself. She suddenly worried that the guard would associate her with the abuse of power because of this incident. Probably because of the giant beast. I messed up my self-control. Her Royal Highness quietly explained to herself. Eben, where is your home? Princess Yamalana heaved a sigh of relief, then turned around expressionlessly and asked in a seemingly casual manner. Let's start with the daily life. An approachable image is also a virtue that a wise ruler should have. The princess also quietly gave a good reason for her action. It's quite far. The guard thought for a while and said, It's in the east, far away from here. Princess Yamana nodded. Is it on the east city wall? It's quite far from the palace. The air was dead silent for about half a minute, and then Princess Yamana, who had always been good at talking, suddenly said, I like the market on the east city wall. I passed by it several times, and I want to go and have a look. The guard blinked with a look that said, Go on, I'm listening. Well, that's all. Princess Yamalana turned around and strode forward. She couldn't help but smile bitterly. In fact, she was not good with words, and she rarely communicated with people like this, not even with her father in the kingdom. She suddenly realized that in addition to the high priest in this sun city, she seemed to have never talked to anyone easily. This guard probably wouldn't either, because she was a princess and he was just a small guard. Since we passed by it several times and want to go in and take a look, why not go in and take a look? I can't stop. Princess Yamanlana immediately stopped and replied faster than the guard had expected. Once you stop, you'll be relaxed. The kingdom is not as peaceful as it seems on the surface. We have always been under great threat. If we are not careful, what awaits us is the destruction of our country. Princess, are you referring to the giant beasts in the desert? The guard asked curiously. Princess Yamalana nodded and said seriously, These giant beasts are not only huge, but they can also hide under the desert. Some of them can even disguise themselves as rocks. If you're not careful, you will become their food. In order to wipe out these giant beasts, Sun City sacrificed many young soldiers every year. Moreover, I don't know when this kind of war will end. Perhaps one day, Sun City will cease to exist. Who knows? The guard looked back at the temple in the distance and asked curiously, Isn't Sun City protected by the sun god? Even so, it will still fall? Princess Yamalana shook her head as if she didn't want to say more. She looked deeply at the guard and suddenly asked, Ivan, young warrior, when danger comes, are you willing to step forward and fight against death for your country and your family? The day when the night is the longest is coming soon. Are you ready? The guard shook his head directly. Princess Yamalana looked at Ivan in surprise, then shook her head and said with a complicated expression, In fact, I'm not ready either. The whole kingdom is not ready either, but only a few people can see it clearly. This princess seemed to have misunderstood something, but the guard didn't intend to explain. He just thought for a while and asked, What are these giant beasts? Princess Yamalana suddenly said, Ivan, you haven't seen these giant beasts with your own eyes, right? I'm not talking about what you see across the city wall on the day when the night is the longest, but standing in front of them and touching their bodies. Indeed, I haven't. The guard shook his head again. Princess Yamalana suddenly smiled, as if she thought of something fun. Come, I'll take you to a place. The guard said, Princess, aren't you going to attend the banquet? Princess Yamalana said indifferently, This kind of boring banquet. You can go any time. If you're hungry, I'll let you prepare something for you. The guard smiled and said, I don't seem to have a reason to refuse. Princess Yamanlana glanced at the young guard angrily. She was the princess of the City of the Sun. How could she treat him like a prince? Probably. It had been a long time since she had met a guy who didn't care about her status as a princess. Ivan, have you thought about what the outside world is like? Princess Yamalana suddenly asked. The place outside the desert? The guard thought for a while and said, It's said that there are places outside the desert, but the giant beasts block the way out of the desert. Princess Yamalana said, How can it be only the giant beasts in the desert that block the way? The outside world. The outside world? Princess Yamalana shook her head, and her expression became serious again. Nothing. We have to speed up. Although we don't have to be there on time, it'll be troublesome if we keep missing the banquet. She walked in another direction, and her pace gradually quickened. Along the way, she didn't stop to talk to the young guard. I'm going to die. This thought had been completely thrown out of Claudia's mind and was replaced by I'm going to die. She probably underestimated Princess Yamalana's influence in the kingdom. Originally, she was only traveling with Moni, the son of the Minister of Agriculture, but the number of people in the team gradually increased. They were all the sons of the ministers of the kingdom. Claudia met them on the way, and then like ants around honey, they immediately stuck to her. They sang praises beside her. Claudia didn't see how outstanding these sons of the ministers were, but these guys were quite good at sweet talking. In school, Claudia had never experienced being surrounded by so many men. She always felt that this experience of being surrounded by men was like a monkey in a zoo. But the real experience it was actually not bad. It was really nice. Claudia couldn't help but feel like she was floating in the sea of handsome, sunny, or polite appearances. She even thought to herself, since I can meet Princess Yamalana, who is like me, and also meet Ibn, who is like Arya, would I also meet a guy who got separated from me? As one of the sons of these ministers? What are you looking at? Mr. Otto, as the guard of Princess Yamalana, leaned forward and asked in a low voice, Did you find something? No, nothing. Mr. Otto's voice made some strange thoughts disappear from Claudia's mind, and she quickly said, I just want to see if that guy came here. Really? Yes. Mr. Otto nodded, looked at Claudia strangely, and then said, You need to find a reason to leave in front of these young masters. We are about to reach the banquet venue. Once we meet the real Princess Yamalana, we will be in trouble. I know. Claudia's face gradually became dignified. If she just wanted to find an excuse, then that was the only excuse. Everyone, I have something to do. Please excuse me. Claudia opened her mouth, but suddenly interrupted. Yamalana, the pride of the kingdom, my daughter. Not far away, the pharaoh of the kingdom, surrounded by a group of attendants, slowly walked over. The sons of ministers around Claudia all stepped back. Claudia's eyes suddenly turned black, and she gave Mr. Otto a death stare. Then she watched the pharaoh of the kingdom finally come in front of her with her scalp tingling. Unexpectedly, Mr. Otto lowered his head at this time and quietly took 2 steps back. Claudia's pupils couldn't help but shrink. I have never seen such a shameless guy. I'm so angry. I thought you didn't plan to attend tonight's banquet. The pharaoh of the kingdom didn't find anything wrong with the princess in front of him. He affectionately grabbed the princess's hand and said with a kind smile, I sent someone to your palace to look for you, but I didn't see you. I didn't expect you to be here. I'm so happy, my daughter. Claudia had to bite the bullet and said, After all, it's a celebration banquet. If I don't attend, others will say that I don't respect you. The pharaoh of the kingdom opened his mouth and looked at his daughter with some surprise, then suddenly laughed and said, Others said that Princess Yamalana's achievements overshadowed her master's, and she never put me in her eyes. Look at all of you. The people who said this can be executed. This is my good daughter, the pride of the kingdom. Ha ha. Everyone kept quiet out of fear. Cold sweat dripped down, and they all agreed. The pharaoh of the kingdom didn't care about this. He pulled the princess's hand and walked towards the banquet area and said loudly, Let's go. My princess, let these people see how good the relationship between us father and daughter is. Princess, Claudia's wrist was grabbed by the pharaoh of the kingdom, and her heart suddenly beat fast, and her breathing became rapid. Her legs became weak. I'm going to die. This time I'm really going to die. Claudia's neck stiffened and looked back, but she saw that Mr. Otto didn't say anything at this time and quietly mixed in with the pharaoh's servants and guards. She was more or less relieved. Unexpectedly, after a short while, Mr. Otto, who had blended in with the servants, had disappeared. Claudia immediately cursed. Men are all trash. My son, who made you angry? The pharaoh of the kingdom was shocked at this time. Did these guys offend you? You must tell me. I will execute them for you. How much do you like to execute people? Yamlana, the pharaoh asked again with concern. Claudia suddenly remembered that before entering the palace, Ibn had said that this banquet was for the pharaoh to choose a husband for Princess Yamlana. She suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Tonight, there will be a person who can spend the rest of my life with me, but I like to give this person some tests. The pharaoh of the kingdom couldn't help but ask curiously, "Tests? I need to prepare." At this time, Claudia said seriously, "In order to be fair, only I can know the test questions." The pharaoh of the kingdom heard this and immediately waved his hand. "This is easy. Come, prepare a room for the princess." Just like that, the Princess Royal Highness walked into a separate room in the banquet hall under the watchful eyes of the crowd. However, in order to keep this test a secret, the pharaoh even sent more than 10 warriors to guard the room to ensure that no one would be able to peek into the room. In the room, the princess sat paralyzed in front of the door and muttered to herself, "Why did I make such a request? Isn't this reaping what I sowed?" Since outsiders couldn't enter, the princess naturally couldn't leave either. This place didn't look as luxurious as the other places in the palace, but it was definitely not shabby, and there were many soldiers guarding this place. The soldiers looked like elite soldiers, and they didn't smile much. Even when Yamlana came in person, she didn't make much noise and just quietly opened the door. "What is this place?" the young guard asked curiously at this time. "A place to study the giant beasts," Princess Yamlana said indifferently. "This place collects some of the giant beasts that the kingdom has killed over the years. The best scholars of the kingdom are all here, and their only purpose is to study how to kill the giant beasts more effectively. Come, I will take you to see the giant beast bodies." Unlike the indifferent guards outside, they had to go through a lot of guards to enter the research institute. When the people working here saw Princess Yamlana, they all came up to greet her warmly. The young guard took advantage of the time when Princess Yamlana was talking to the scholars here and began to look around. This place was like a museum, and there were shells around the huge bodies. Looking at the shape of the bones left, it seemed that one could already imagine the appearance of these giant beasts when they were alive. The young guard gradually walked to the front of a pool, and a pungent smell suddenly came into his nose. In the transparent liquid in the pool, there was a huge and ferocious giant beast's head. Very shocking, right? Princess Yamlana had come behind the young guard without him noticing. "This is the giant beast's head. We killed it 2 years ago. We spent a lot of effort to cut off its head and transport it to this place." The young guard blinked his eyes and suddenly asked, "What's the thing that's soaking this head?" "Formalin," Princess Yamlana said casually. "It is a kind of potion used to prevent the body from rotting. Most of the giant beast bodies and internal organs here are soaked in this potion." Formalin solution. Chapter 1530. Is this potion different from the one used to make mummies? The young guard looked at Princess Yamlana and asked. As an essential mummy in the ancient Egyptian civilization, it was something that almost everyone knew. However, the craftsmanship of mummies was not something that ordinary people could master. Otherwise, the number of mummies that have been passed down to modern times would not be so few. Princess Yamlana seemed to be surprised that this young guard was interested in the potion itself. She thought for a moment and said, "This formalin potion was obtained through a special way. Later, I brought it back here, and then asked the scholars here to study it with me. It took a long time to find the substitute herbs, and finally, the potion was successfully concocted." "A special way? Outside the desert?" the young guard asked immediately. Princess Yamlana said, "This way is not suitable for ordinary people. It's useless even if you know it." The young guard just nodded and didn't seem to want to ask more. His attitude made Princess Yamlana's beautiful eyes smile. She suddenly understood why she felt so comfortable being with this guy. Because he was just curious and didn't have any other intentions. Princess Yamlana couldn't imagine why such a person would become a guard in the palace. Maybe he was more suitable to be a scholar. "Ivan, are you interested in learning?" Princess Yamlana looked at him with sparkling eyes. "Learning?" The young guard smiled and said, "I like learning." Princess Yamlana went one step further. She opened her arms, and her expression carried a hint of fanaticism, like a certain mustached head of state. Ibn, you are still young. You still have a lot of time in the future. Have you ever thought about changing your life through learning? Think about it. As a guard in the palace, you may have to wait until you are 40 years old before you can start your career. During this process, you don't know if you can survive every night and the longest day. But if you're willing to learn and be a scholar, the situation will be different. I will try my best to protect every scholar who is loyal to me, because scholars are the most important wealth of the kingdom. Do you know what everything in this research institute is? The things here can help us kill the giant beasts more efficiently and can help us understand the characteristics of the giant beasts, their living habits, and even the origin of these giant beasts. All of these are the subjects called science, and science is the only ultimate power that can change the world. The young guard suddenly said, "No wonder the people here look so young. Did the princess encourage them to come in before?" Princess Yamalana said, "Only young people have passion and the courage to challenge tradition." That's right. Although the scholars here were young, their knowledge was definitely not much worse than those famous scholars in the kingdom. They are even more energetic and willing to come into contact with new subjects than the old scholars. The future has always been in the hands of the younger generation. Seeing that Princess Yamalana was getting more and more excited, the young guard said casually, "I think I need to think about it." Princess Yamalana didn't seem to be disappointed because of this. She even seemed to have expected this reaction. "It's okay. You should think about it carefully. Think about it carefully. Think about it carefully. Think about what this country really needs. I will wait for your answer, Ibn." They looked at each other for a few breaths. The young guard acted as if this conversation didn't happen. He turned around and looked at the giant beast's head in the pool. "Your Highness, it seems that this place has been studied for a while. I don't know if the scholars here have found the origin of these giant beasts." Princess Yamalana seemed to be quite dissatisfied with the indifference of the young guard. She frowned slightly, but soon calmed down and said indifferently, "These giant beasts shouldn't be so huge. In fact, through collecting specimens for so many years, we found that these giant beasts and many ordinary creatures living in the desert have similar structures. Look here." Princess Yamalana pointed to the pool on the other side. There were many pools of different sizes here, and the one the young guard was standing on was just one of them. On the other side of the pool, there was a complete corpse of a giant beast. The total volume of this giant beast corpse was about the size of the giant beast's head. It was about 3 meters high. "Look, what does this giant beast look like?" Princess Yamalana asked directly. The young guard said, "It looks a bit like a scorpion." "Yes, it looks like a scorpion." Princess Yamalana nodded. "Through hunting this giant beast, we found that it has the same habits as a scorpion. After that, we broke open its body and found that its internal organs were basically the same as a scorpion's. However, its internal organs were obviously stronger. Its shell had become stronger, and its pincers had become sharper. It could even shoot out venom to corrode rocks and sand. Its speed was even more astonishing." Speaking of this, Princess Yamalana couldn't help but shake her head and smile bitterly. If it weren't for the fact that these giant beasts don't like to live in groups and even kill each other, we wouldn't have any chance of winning against such powerful beasts. "What is this?" The young guard pointed to the giant beast's body in the pool, which looked like a mutated scorpion, and asked. If you remember correctly, there seemed to be something similar on the forehead of the giant beast's head in the pool, which was a black crystal that looked like a crystal. Princess Yamalana frowned and said, "In fact, we don't know what it is. Not every giant beast has this kind of curse stone. Only extremely powerful or special giant beasts can find this kind of crystal. Why is it called the cursed stone?" Princess Yamalana thought for a while and said, "If anyone touches it by accident, their body will be corroded, and then they will become a pile of sand. It's like being cursed by the enemy of the sun god, the evil desert master. So, we call it the cursed stone." "Desert master. Seth?" The young guard thought for a while. Princess Yamalana frowned and asked with a warning look in her eyes, "Ivan, in the City of the Sun, you are not allowed to mention this evil name. You should know that." "I just found out," the young guard said, but your highness just told me that we should be brave enough to challenge those old things. At the same time, as the saintess of the temple of the sun god, Princess Yamalana's face darkened. Mortals shouldn't comment on the gods. As the people of the sun god, we should follow the rules of the gods. However, the young guard suddenly smiled. What are you laughing at? Princess Yamalana frowned. The young guard casually glanced at the passage that they came in from, and then he looked at the princess and said slowly, "Science, the ultimate power to change the world. This is what you believe in, your highness. I'm just curious. I don't know if the power of science can defeat the gods." His voice wasn't loud, but it suddenly silenced all the sounds in the entire research institute. It was quiet all around, and the busy scholars all stopped and looked at this young guard. There was fear in their eyes, and confusion, and even a trace of fanaticism. Princess Yamalana opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. The princess looked around and suddenly waved her hand and said in a deep voice, "Today's visiting time is over. The banquet should have started, and I should be there. Come with me." Finally, under the silent gaze of many young scholars, the young guard and Princess Yamalana slowly left this heavily guarded research institute. After the princess and the guard left, the young scholars gathered together and whispered something. "Did you hear that? He said that. Shoo, this is a taboo. Don't mention it again." "Since it's a taboo, then why are we here? Isn't it just a challenge?" "Shut up." The scholars suddenly kept quiet out of fear, because the one who said, "Shut up," was the oldest one among them, and also one of the founders who first followed the princess to establish the research institute. The brief chaos was quickly suppressed, and the young scholars began their research work again. But no one noticed that in the midst of the sudden discussion and commotion, a black shadow had quietly broken into the research institute and quietly walked deeper into the research institute. That was the place where the princess didn't take the young guard to visit, where the core secrets of the research institute were kept. Princess Yamalana didn't say anything along the way and walked alone in the front until she saw the lights in front of her, which was probably not far from the banquet. The princess suddenly stopped. "Ivan, I hope you won't tell anyone what happened today," the young guard curiously asked. "The research institute is in the palace, in such a big building. Don't the people in the palace know about it?" Princess Yamalana shook her head. "The people in the palace, including the great god, know that I have such a research institute, but they just think it's a place where I use it to research weapons to deal with the giant beasts. I'm talking about science and what you said at the end. If you don't want to be regarded as a heretic by the kingdom, you'd better not say the same words again." "Then what's your answer, princess?" the young guard asked in a low voice. "What?" Princess Yamalana was stunned subconsciously, and even her face darkened. The young guard acted like he didn't see it, and continued to ask, "Princess, do you think science can defeat the gods as the ultimate force to change the world?" "I said it." Princess Yamalana was instantly furious. "Don't say the same words again. Ivan, do you really think I don't dare to kill you?" Princess Yamalana was so angry that she even took out the artifact that she kept with her and pointed it at the young guard. The young guard shook his head. "As the princess of the kingdom, I believe that you have the right to do so." "Then why did you do it?" Princess Yamalana glared at him, and her expression became more and more fierce. The young guard said, "Because I want to know if your highness wants to recruit me as your scholar. Will you be willing to open your heart to me? I want to know, what do you believe in? Is it the gods or science?" The artifact, the pistol, shook a few times because of the emotional fluctuation of the holder at this time. Princess Yamalana took a deep breath and finally lowered the artifact slowly and then put it away. Then she said slowly, "Use your eyes to see. You can judge for yourself whether it's worth being a scholar or not. This is the last warning. You're not allowed to say the same words for the third time. Next time, I won't hesitate at all." "I see." The young guard nodded, and then said softly, "Then, let me follow you for the time being. Use my eyes to see clearly." Princess Yamalana's eyebrows couldn't help but twitch slightly, and then she snorted and turned around. "This guy, is he doing it on purpose?" These words, compared to flirting, are, at this moment. "Quick, Come here and look for it. I will definitely find it. Find something that can make the princess smile. Haha. I will become the princess of the kingdom. Dream on. The person who can find something that can make the princess smile must be me. Get out of my way, all of you. Haha. I didn't expect Princess Yamalana's question to be so simple. I already know the answer. A few palace guards and a man who looked like a young master of a minister's family rushed into the courtyard at this time, and then they started to look for something everywhere. They didn't talk loudly, but it was enough for Princess Yamalana, who was in the dim corridor, to hear them clearly. Princess Yamalana was stunned. She was a smart person, and just by listening to these men's words, she had already guessed what was going on. The general idea was that the princess gave a question, and the man who could solve this question would be her guest. The princess? But Princess Yamalana didn't remember when she gave a question. Could it be father? Princess Yamalana was confused. She knew that she had a bad relationship with the pharaoh of the kingdom, and in order to restrict her, the pharaoh did want her to get married. You really want me to? Princess Yamalana silently looked at the banquet lights not far away and suddenly sighed slowly. What happened? The young guard walked forward and asked curiously. At this moment, Princess Yamalana raised her head and looked at the young guard in front of her. Suddenly, she gritted her teeth. The princess suddenly reached out her hand and took off her earring, stuffing it into the young guard's hand. You take this earring to the pharaoh and then tell him. I already have the answer. The young guard. Father, since you want me to get married so much, I will fulfill your wish. Chapter 15:31. The pharaoh of the kingdom was a magnanimous person. After the Princess Royal Highness gave the question, he waved his hand and allowed the sons of the ministers and even the young guards in the palace to move around freely other than a few palaces to search for the item that could make the Princess Royal Highness smile. The princess's original words were, "Do you want me and my wealth? If you want it, I can give it all to you. Go and find it. The thing that can make me smile is hidden in this palace. Roar. Go and find it. Go." Therefore, there was a lively scene in the palace that hadn't been seen for decades. The pharaoh of the kingdom hadn't been this happy for many years. At this moment, he allowed these young men to mess around in his palace and drank with the ministers. He watched as the young warriors carried all kinds of things into the attic where the Princess Royal Highness was. Then they walked down dejectedly. Oh, this seems to be the general's son. He didn't succeed either? Actually, I quite like his bravery. The pharaoh of the kingdom commented from time to time. As for the fathers whose sons were commented on, it was unknown whether they were happy or not. The farce was still going on. The moon was already high in the sky. At this moment, a guard hurriedly ran over and said in front of the pharaoh of the kingdom and the ministers, "The high priest is back. He'll be here soon." The high priest? The pharaoh of the kingdom was stunned. Then he stood up and laughed. This is really a good day. Unlike the pharaoh of the kingdom, who was happy at this time, the ministers were secretly shocked. They knew that Princess Yamalana had another identity, the saintess of the temple. Although the temple didn't forbid the marriage of the saintess of the temple, the appearance of the high priest seemed to mean something. After all, the former queen, who was the saintess of Princess Yamalana, was also the previous saintess of the temple. Where is the high priest now? The pharaoh of the kingdom asked directly at this time. The guard quickly replied, "The high priest said that he didn't want to disturb everyone. He only asked me to tell you that he walked around and will come back here later." Oh, the pharaoh of the kingdom frowned, then nodded. "If that's the case, we'll continue the banquet. You may leave as well." The pharaoh of the kingdom waved his hand and dismissed the guard who came to inform him. Then he raised his wine cup again, but his smile was not as warm as before. "Dear Princess Yamalana, this is a holy ibis that I specially brought from a corner of the palace for you. Look at its cute appearance. It can really make people smile from the bottom of their hearts." Through the curtain, Claudia is carrying the young man who brought the holy ibis. She listens to his sweet words and looks at the lights in the sun city outside the window. The celebration is not only in the palace, but also in the entire city. She seemed to be able to faintly hear voices coming from outside the palace. She actually felt that it would be better to be outside the palace, probably because she wasn't a real princess. In the beginning, the flattery of these young men did make her feel like she was floating in the air, but in the middle of the night, she was already tired of these voices and even felt a sense of disgust. The young man behind the curtain was still talking nonstop. The annoyed Claudia suddenly turned around, waved her hand, and said coldly, "Okay, you successfully made me unable to smile. Next, Your Highness, Your Highness, my love for you." The voice gradually faded away, but the young man was lifted up by two strong guards, one on the left and one on the right, and sent out of the pavilion. Then, the next one would come. Claudia rubbed her forehead as she felt a headache coming on. At this moment, she was thinking about how to leave this loft. She looked at the window sill and discovered that it wasn't very high from here to the ground. If she were to climb down from here, maybe. Claudia gritted her teeth and remembered that she often climbed down the sewer pipe at home when she was young. Then she made up her mind. "Come here." Claudia called a maid outside the curtain inn. The maid was in fear and trepidation. After entering, she heard the Princess's Highness order. "You sit here." Claudia looked at the maid expressionlessly. Later on, whenever someone comes in, don't say anything. Just let him speak 3 sentences. After speaking, you wave your hand and let the guards send him out. Ah, the maid was shocked. Claudia immediately learned from the maid and said, "This is an order. If you don't listen, I will kill you." "No, I will listen. I will listen." The maid lowered her head and said with a sobbing voice. Claudia laughed and quickly changed her clothes with the maid. Then she walked to the window sill, lifted her skirt, and climbed out. At this time, the next young man had already arrived. In the midst of the panic, the maid could only imitate the princess from before. With her back facing the young man, she silently counted the number of times the young man spoke in fear. "Say 3 sentences. Say 3 sentences. 3 sentences. How many sentences is this? F*CKU princess. I don't want to play with you anymore." Claudia slowly climbed down along the outer wall of the palace. She even cursed at the same time. She wanted to leave this place as far as possible. Men are unreliable. I have to think of a way by myself. At the critical moment, what new classmate? What Mr. Otto? Go to hell. Finally, she climbed down. Claudia heaved a sigh of relief and looked up. She realized that after so many years, she didn't seem to have fallen behind in climbing walls. She twisted her neck and immediately turned around to leave. At this moment, as a princess, don't you think this kind of behavior is really harmful to the image of a princess? "Yamalana." A voice came from behind. A man. Claudia was shocked. At the same time, she suddenly turned around and looked at the dark place. She even widened her eyes. This voice made her feel unreal. Her lips moved slightly as if she wanted to say something. In the dark, a figure slowly walked out. He didn't wear a guard's uniform. It was different from a uniform of the general palace ministers. He also wasn't a noble in the city. He wore a white robe, which made him look quite solemn. But Claudia's eyes suddenly became hazy. She didn't even say a word. She directly walked toward the person and hugged him tightly. Professor Siegiatu. She actually saw her father in this place. The missing Professor Siegiatu. "Father," she cried out with a voice full of grievance. She looked up at the man in the white robe in front of her. "Father." But soon, Claudia felt something wrong. Professor Siegiatu in front of her was not as excited as she imagined. He was unusually calm. A very strange feeling made Claudia subconsciously let go of her hands and even took a small step back. The man in the white robe frowned slightly at this time, as if he was thinking about something. Then he slowly said, "Yamalana, I heard that Pharaoh wanted to find a husband for you. I know you suffered a lot, but you can't call me father because of this. I'm just your teacher, Yamalana." "Teacher, teacher." Claudia opened her mouth and suddenly realized something. There was Princess Yamalana, who looked exactly like her, and there was Ivan. Then, there was also a teacher like her father, Professor Siegiatu. "Have you forgotten? I'm a high priest of the temple, your teacher." The man in the white robe, shook his head at this time. Poor Yamalana, it seems that what Pharaoh did this time really hurt your heart. I. Claudia suddenly found that she didn't know how to face the high priest like Professor Sieju. I'm not. The high priest showed a kind smile at this time. Don't worry, I'm back. I'll deal with these difficult problems for you and end this farce. Claudia fell silent. Only now did she realize how strong she was. She took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. Nodding, she said, "This is indeed a farce. I don't have the time to accompany them in their madness. If the high priestess can resolve this for me, that would naturally be for the best. I'll solve it for you, my little princess. All your difficulties, I'll solve them for you. Come with me." The high priest smiled at this time. "I'll go with you to see your father." Claudia opened her mouth, but in the end, she could only nod. She felt that she had just walked out of a difficult situation, but immediately fell into a quagmire again. She bitterly smiled. She couldn't understand why she encountered such strange things. Just a few days ago, she was just an ordinary university student. Two figures walked into the banquet hall in a hurry. When the guards in front of the banquet hall saw them, they were all stunned and then hurriedly stepped back. Her Royal Highness Princess Yamalana, and she was wearing the battle armor Princess Yamalana wore. The princess in her armor was too dazzling, and people couldn't even look at her in the eye. The guards didn't stop retreating, and they even kneeled down subconsciously. No one noticed that there was a young guard behind Yamalana. Her Royal Highness Yamalana? It's Her Royal Highness Princess Yamalana. Walking into the hall, Princess Yamalana was like a bright pearl, instantly attracting everyone's attention, especially those young talents who were racking their brains to solve the test of Her Royal Highness Princess. Although they were very curious as to why the princess would suddenly appear here and not in the attic. Although they were also very curious as to why the princess would suddenly wear the armor that she would wear when she went to war. However, Your Royal Highness Princess, look, this is the ice from the palace's freezer for you. I specially carve it to look like you. It's going to melt. Damn the weather. Your Royal Highness Princess, don't look at his ice sculpture. He didn't carve it himself. Look at mine. This is a painting. Do you see it? I used the paint I scraped off from the walls of the palace. Ouch, don't step on me. Facing those young men, the murderous look on Princess Yamalana's face became more and more intense. She was like a volcano that was about to erupt. Your Royal Highness Princess, you must look at this. Finally, the volcano erupted. At this moment, Princess Yamalana, who had a pale face, suddenly pulled out a sword from the waist of a guard beside her, raised it up high. Then, she fiercely chopped down. At the same time that the ice sculpture was split open, the saber even directly cut into the ground, almost cutting into the crotch of the young master who brought the ice sculpture. But this young master was already scared to the point that his face was pale, paralyzed on the ground. The saber was really a finger's distance away from cutting into his life's happiness. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Subconsciously, they felt a shiver run down their spines. F***CK off. Princess Yamalana angrily shouted. Everyone retreated. After that, Princess Yamalana coldly snorted and walked directly to the place where the pharaoh of the kingdom and the ministers were drinking with each other. Holding the sword, the princess walked up the stairs step by step to the front of the pharaoh of the kingdom, and the ministers around the pharaoh of the kingdom were so scared that they all shivered. 3 years ago, there was a minister who objected to the princess going to war. The next day, this minister mysteriously disappeared. The ministers all guessed that he was secretly killed by the princess. This princess really dared to kill those who opposed her without saying a word. Finally, Princess Yamalana, who walked up to the throne, waved the sword and chopped it on the throne handle of the pharaoh of the kingdom. The sword was embedded in the throne, and it was still vibrating, making a buzzing sound. The pharaoh of the kingdom swallowed his saliva and looked at the swaying sword in front of him with cold sweat all over his body. Yamalana, my daughter, tell me, who made you angry? I will definitely kill him for you. Will you kill yourself? Princess Yamalana suddenly said. The pharaoh of the kingdom opened his mouth, and his face slightly changed, and then his face turned pale. In front of everyone, Yamalana, you've gone too far. I'm the pharaoh of the kingdom. The pharaoh was also very angry at this time. He stood up and stared at the princess in front of him. Princess Yamalana was not afraid, and she stared at him like two lions in the grassland, not giving in to each other. In the end, the pharaoh of the kingdom sighed slowly and said in a low voice as if he had a headache, "What's the matter? Wait until we go back to the palace. The ministers are still watching, and the people are still watching. Yamalana, I beg you." The princess just silently took off the earring on her right ear and threw it in front of the pharaoh of the kingdom. This action seemed to make the pharaoh even angrier than chopping the sword on the throne of the kingdom's pharaoh, and he was not polite anymore. "Yamalana, how dare you? This is your mother's. The other one is in his hands." The princess said coldly, "This is my answer, the pharaoh of the kingdom. I will choose my husband myself." The pharaoh of the kingdom immediately opened his mouth and subconsciously looked behind the princess, and then frowned. "Yamalana, there is a limit to your nonsense. There is no one behind you." The princess turned around subconsciously, but there was no one behind her, and she could not see the young guard at all. The princess even looked down from the stairs, but under the watchful eyes of the people below, she could not find the young guard at all. "This is too much." The princess was so angry that she could not say anything. Chapter 1532. Maybe he quietly left during the chaos. Or maybe he already realized her motive when she threw out the earrings. There were too many possibilities. At this moment, these possibilities quickly appeared in Princess Yamana's mind. But no matter how hard she tried to imagine, she couldn't imagine that the truth was that this young guard didn't leave the scene of the banquet, and he didn't even go far away from her. Just beside her, the young guard's eyes were always on Princess Yamana, looking at her quietly. Just as Princess Yamana once said, "If you want to know the answer, you have to observe and judge with your own eyes." At this moment, the young guard was looking at Princess Yamana up and down. He was expressionless, and no one knew what he was thinking. In fact, no one could see the expression on the young guard's face clearly, because in everyone's eyes, this young guard's existence seemed to be just a speck of dust on the ground. No one would have any opinions about a speck of dust on the ground. "Yamana, stop your farce right now." The pharaoh of the kingdom shouted at this moment. He felt that he needed to emphasize his supreme power in the kingdom. Although Princess Yamana was his only descendant and the most outstanding woman in the kingdom. "I'm not fooling around." Surprisingly, the princess looked quite calm at this moment. She slowly turned around and looked at her father, the pharaoh of the kingdom, and said indifferently, "I already have a candidate in my heart. Maybe you can't see him, even I can't see him now, but I can feel that he's beside me, right here, the young guard." Boss Luo heard this and suddenly blinked his eyes. His presence, which had been reduced to an extremely low level, was reduced again. This time, he probably became the air in other people's eyes. "In my heart." The princess's unfinished words sounded in everyone's ears. She was like a pure girl who was pouring out her inner thoughts. Boss Luo didn't continue to reduce his presence. At this moment, looking at the longing and happiness on Princess Yamalana's face, many of the young geniuses of the kingdoms felt dejected. They suddenly understood that no matter how hard they tried, they wouldn't be able to get into Princess Yamalana's heart because her heart had already been taken by someone else. "Who is it?" The pharaoh of the kingdom frowned and asked in a deep voice. Not to mention as a father, as a man who had a partner, he was very clear about this kind of girl's yearning. Although the pharaoh of the kingdom intended to choose a suitable husband for the princess in this banquet, when he really felt that the princess's heart had been occupied by another man, the pharaoh of the kingdom felt that his most precious treasure had been taken away. At this moment, the pharaoh of the kingdom seemed to have forgotten Princess Yamana's fuss just now. Like an angry lion, his voice at the peak of the king's power echoed in the banquet hall. "The guy who made Princess Yamana sad, come out. As a man, don't you have the courage to stand out and face the father of a daughter?" Boss Luo thought for a while and felt that it was necessary to reduce his presence even more. After the air, what was it again? Time passed slowly. The banquet hall became quiet after Princess Yamana walked up the stairs. At this moment, it was so quiet that only the pharaoh of the kingdom's sharp eyes were scanning the hall. But there was still no movement. Looking at the group of nobles and ministers who didn't know what to do, the pharaoh of the kingdom took a deep breath and heavily knocked the floor with the scepter in his hand. He glared at Princess Yamana. "I don't allow you to choose your own husband. Your husband can only be recognized by me." Princess Yamana's face became cold again. "If so, from tonight onwards, Yamana is no longer your daughter and no longer the kingdom's princess. Yamana, you... That's it." Yamalana heaved a sigh of relief. "Don't worry. From now on, I will live in the temple, and I will fight the giant beasts as usual. When the night is the longest, I will appear on the city wall of the kingdom." Yamana, you are so presumptuous." The pharaoh of the kingdom was so angry that his face turned red. He raised the scepter in his hand, and it seemed that he wanted to give an order, but his rationality seemed to be restraining his impulse. Yamana took a deep look at the pharaoh of the kingdom, then turned around and slowly walked down the stairs. Her eyes were so sharp that no one dared to look in her eyes. Before Yamalana even walked down the stairs, people had already subconsciously moved to the sides, making a wide path to leave the banquet venue. At this moment, something strange happened. In an instant, more than a dozen figures rushed into the banquet hall. These people were wearing white robes, barefoot, and had tattoos of the sun god on their faces. The guards of the temple. More than a dozen guards of the temple from the depths of the palace suddenly appeared in the banquet hall. These guards of the temple easily pushed away the young talents and the kingdom's guards, and directly came to Yamana and surrounded her. Seeing this scene, the ministers suddenly realized it seemed that Princess Yamana's falling out with the pharaoh of the kingdom tonight was premeditated. Look, as the saintess of the temple, this princess even sent out the white-robed guards of the temple. These white-robed guards were all brave and extraordinary warriors. More than a dozen ordinary guards were no match for one white-robed guard. With more than a dozen white-robed guards, even if the pharaoh of the kingdom ordered the palace's guards to come out, he was afraid that he couldn't stop Princess Yamana from entering the temple. Yamana, how could the pharaoh of the kingdom not see these white-robed guards at this time? The pharaoh's face became very ugly, and he muttered to himself, "Do you really hate me so much?" Even the white-robed guards are sent out. The pharaoh of the kingdom suddenly sat down in disappointment. From the moment these white-robed guards appeared, he actually already knew that Yamana would enter the temple tonight, and from then on, she would no longer be the princess of the royal family. It was a foregone conclusion, but things didn't seem to be so simple. Just when everyone thought that Princess Yamana would just leave like this, the more than a dozen white-robed guards who broke into the banquet hall actually took out their weapons and aimed at Princess Yamana, who was in the circle. They actually didn't come to escort the princess? What kind of drama was this? They didn't know what was going on, and even Yamana herself didn't know what these white-robed guards were doing. Princess Yamana frowned at this time and snorted coldly. "What are you doing? Don't you know who I am? Who asked you to come?" "In the name of the high priest, we're here to catch the monster who pretends to be Princess Yamana." A particularly tall and sturdy man among the white-robed guards said loudly at this time, "The high priest? The monster who pretends to be the princess?" All the nobles and ministers were shocked. The young geniuses gasped. The pharaoh of the kingdom even stood up from his throne, but Yamalana's eyebrows were furrowed so tightly that they looked terrible. What nonsense are you talking about?" Yamana shouted in a deep voice. But the white-robed guards didn't care. They had already taken out their weapons, and now they started to attack Yamana mercilessly. At this time, facing the fierce attacks of the white-robed guards, Yamana didn't dare to be careless even though she had experienced countless battles with giant beasts. These white-robed guards who were personally trained by the temple were very powerful, and Yamana knew better than anyone in the palace how powerful they were. To be honest, Yamana's training over the years was at the level of these white robe guards at most. But here, there were more than a dozen white robe guards who were at the same level as her. Are you crazy? How dare you attack me? Facing Yamana's angry roar, the white-robed guards didn't waver at all, and they still attacked fiercely. They quickly took out their weapons, while Princess Yamana was fighting against them empty-handed at this time. In just a short while, Princess Yamana had been defeated. Seeing that she was about to be caught by these white-robed guards, Princess Yamana gritted her teeth and instantly took out the divine artifact that she kept close to her body. But the white-robed guards seemed to have expected this, and one of them threw out a big net at this time, which instantly covered Princess Yamana. They started to tighten the rope of the big net, and Yamana was tightly bound. The divine artifact in her hand was even knocked down to the ground by a white-robed guard who rushed out from behind. Princess Yamana was instantly flustered, seeing that the divine artifact that was knocked down to the ground was now sliding out. Due to inertia, a feeling of fear arose spontaneously. The divine artifact that slid out. The pistol finally stopped in front of Figure. The figure bent down, picked up the divine artifact that was given by the sun god, and raised it to the sky without saying anything. Bang! That was a loud sound that shocked the whole audience and also attracted everyone's attention. They looked at the person who held the divine artifact in his hand. He was also wearing a white robe. High Priest. It's the High Priest. It's really him. High Priest. Under everyone's gaze, the High Priest in a white robe slowly walked out and walked to the captured Princess Yamana. At this time, Princess Yamana's eyes were wide open, and her chin was directly pinched by the white robe guard. So now she could only let out an unclear whimper. Princess Yamana was still struggling, panic, anger, and disbelief. Finally, the high priest slowly lowered the divine artifact in his hand and pointed it at Princess Yamana, who was pressed on the ground. Princess Yamana's eyes were more sad, so sad that she was almost desperate, and her eyes were instantly filled with blood streaks. But the high priest didn't activate the divine artifact again. He just waved his hand, and a white-robed guard instantly stepped forward, directly knocking Princess Yamana unconscious on the ground. What's going on? At this time, the pharaoh of the kingdom came angrily under the protection of the guards. High priest, how dare you attack the princess? The high priest at this time said indifferently, she's not the real Yamana, but the transformation of a rare giant beast in the desert. What did you say? The pharaoh of the kingdom was shocked. After being shocked, he directly rushed forward, grabbing the high priest's collar with one hand, and stared at him firmly. This is the holy water given by the true God. You'll understand soon. With this, the high priest directly took out a bottle and ordered the white-robed guards to pour the contents of the bottle into the unconscious Princess Yamana's mouth. Ah! A horrified voice came from the crowd. Princess Yamana's body, who had poured the holy water into the high priest's bottle, had a horrible mutation at this time. Lizard-like scales began to grow on her body, and her teeth became sharp. Her beautiful long hair began to peel off, and her beautiful face became ugly. A horrible tail even grew out of her back. Even the pharaoh of the kingdom was shocked by this ugly monster on the ground at this moment. How? How could this happen? The pharaoh of the kingdom suddenly grabbed the high priest's collar again. She's a monster, transformed from a giant beast. Then where's Yamana? Where's the real Yamana? Is she already? Don't worry. The high priest shook his head at this time. Princess Yamana is fine. She's here. Look, she's here. Looking at the direction where the high priest's finger was pointing, they saw a young woman slowly walking out at this time. Yamana. The pharaoh of the kingdom yelled in surprise. Who else could it be if it wasn't Yamana? The clothes she was wearing were the clothes she wore when she just entered the banquet. This was the real Princess Yamana, not the monster who came in armor and finally showed her true form under the attack of the high priest. Princess Highness. Claudia's legs became weak again. She was actually pushed out by someone by the white robe guard behind her. At this moment, facing the crowd's gazes and looking at the motionless, ugly monster on the ground, Claudia even wanted to faint. At this moment, her hair was numb, and her body was trembling to the point that it was hard to hide. Just now, this horrible giant beast sneaked in and knocked the princess out. It even used a special transformation ability to transform into the princess's appearance. The high priest used his voice to attract everyone's attention. This giant beast is probably a spy sent by the giant beasts deep in the desert. Its ultimate goal is to sneak into the temple as the saintess of Princess Yamana's temple and blaspheme the true God. Hearing such a shocking big conspiracy, the crowd couldn't help but turn pale. But don't worry, the high priest said loudly. I'll distribute the sun holy water to everyone, as long as you drink it. Once the giant beast turns into a spy, it will immediately show its true form. Long live the high priest! High priest! High priest! High priest! High priest! They praised the high priest of the temple so fervently. In an instant, the divine power directly suppressed the royal power and climbed to the peak. At this moment, the pharaoh of the kingdom didn't care about the high priest who was being praised by everyone at this moment. He just silently looked at the Princess Highness in front of him and asked softly, Yamana, are you okay? Did the giant beast hurt you? Claudia opened her mouth, but she saw the high priest glancing at her. She subconsciously whispered, No, that's good. The pharaoh of the kingdom sighed lightly at this moment and hugged his daughter. It's good that you're okay. She felt the pharaoh of the kingdom whispering in her ear. The real princess and the pharaoh of the kingdom. Were they really as incompatible as what others said? Chapter 1533. As for the matter of choosing a husband for the princess at the celebration banquet, no one dared to mention it. The monster that was beaten back to its original form by the high priest was still locked in a cage at this time. It was placed in the middle of the banquet, guarded by more than a dozen brave, white-robed guards. The nobles and ministers found all sorts of excuses and hurriedly left the palace with their children. They were the first batch of people who had received the holy water from the high priest. Naturally, they were anxious to go home. Even the proud princess of the kingdom, Yamalana, was successfully replaced by the monster with the ability of transformation. Then, those who stayed with them every night were already, once they thought that the beautiful figure who shared the bed with them was very likely to be the monster, these nobles didn't dare to be cold, even though the city of the sun was full of martial arts. But no matter how brave they were, once the name of controlling the monster spread, they would still meet on the city wall. Therefore, the palace that was bustling for half a night suddenly quieted down. The princess was escorted back to her bedroom by the white-robed guards sent by the high priest because she was frightened tonight. The pharaoh of the kingdom and the high priest were discussing how to deal with a monster that pretended to be Princess Yamalana. The conversation between the pharaoh and the high priest was blocked by everyone except for the guards outside the door, who could occasionally hear the pharaoh's angry voice. He's probably angry because Princess Yamalana was attacked by a giant beast. The guards thought to themselves, Siegiatu, I handed Yamalana to you, but you almost let her be killed by the monster. My patience with you is reaching its limit. The pharaoh of the kingdom was sitting on the throne. At this moment, the pharaoh of the kingdom, who seemed to be a little weak in front of Yamalana and couldn't be tough. But the pharaoh of the kingdom was actually very imposing. The real pharaoh of the kingdom, the peak of the power of the kingdom. I didn't expect this to happen. The high priest said indifferently, Of course, I'm not shirking my responsibility. I did not do well in this matter. From now on, I will take good care of the princess. She is not allowed to fight the monster again. The pharaoh of the kingdom said again in a deep voice. High priest, Siegeru said, you were the one who agreed to let her go to war with the behemoths. If you don't agree, you can only tell her yourself. The pharaoh snorted and said, Do you think I don't know Yamanlana's character? She is just like her mother. Once she has decided on something, not even 10 horses can pull her back. High priest Siedu took a deep look at the pharaoh and slowly said, Since you know that her personality is the same as her mother's, then has her mother ever listened to my advice? You. The pharaoh of the kingdom glared at the high priest Siedu. But soon, he let out a sigh of relief and relaxed his body. He seemed to be tired. He waved his hand and said, "That's all for today. I will send an order to the minister tomorrow about forbidding Yamalana from fighting the giant beasts. As for Yamalana, I will find a way to deal with it myself. I don't need you." Then, High Priest Siejidu said indifferently, "If there's nothing else, I'll return to the temple. I'll take the giant beast outside with me." This kind of giant beast with the ability to transform is very special. I need to study it carefully. Speaking of this matter, the pharaoh of the kingdom was probably not much different from those ministers who left in a hurry. He was also worried that he might have become a man who could control beasts. He opened his mouth and said, "Siejiatu, is your holy water really useful?" The high priest, who seemed to have seen through the pharaoh of the kingdom, said indifferently, "Don't worry. Your new princess has no problem at all." "I didn't mean that. Forget it." The pharaoh of the kingdom shook his head and said, "Hurry up and take that monster away. The day of the longest night is almost here." Now, a giant beast with the ability to transform suddenly appeared. I don't know if it's good or bad. This time, Yamalana came back from the war, and the spies who came back earlier said that the size and number of the giant beasts in the desert seemed to have increased again. The day of the longest night this time? God will still protect this city of the sun. The voice of the high priest seemed to still reverberate in this hall, but the pharaoh of the kingdom could no longer see him. The high priest had left, and only this old man who was sitting on the throne was left. "God?" The pharaoh of the kingdom whispered. "Even if it's God who wants to take away mine, I will do whatever it takes to take God." He sighed, but his heart knew better than his hands that the power of God was simply unmatched by mortals, especially in this city of the sun. At this moment, in the empty royal hall, a voice suddenly sounded, "Sir, do you want to do something to God?" The hall was still empty. The pharaoh of the kingdom was shocked and looked around, but he didn't see anything. But he was sure that he heard something. "Who is it? Come out." The pharaoh of the kingdom suddenly stood up from the throne. He was no longer young, and even his old figure seemed to have grown a few inches taller. His muscles were still strong, and his momentum had been hidden under that seemingly incompetent appearance. He slowly pulled out the sword and the scepter that represented the royal power. "I'm just a traveling merchant who came here by accident," the voice sounded again. "It's the ardent expectation in your heart that led me here. I feel a pure and great emotion. As a father, do you want to consider buying something from me?" Pharaoh of the kingdom. With a voice in front of the pharaoh of the kingdom, a figure slowly walked out of the air. The pharaoh of the kingdom suddenly opened his mouth. What he saw was actually a young man dressed as a royal guard. The pharaoh of the kingdom was stunned at first, and then he frowned. His eyes suddenly shrank, and he asked in a deep voice, "You are Ibn, the person chosen by Yamana?" The young guard, Boss Luo, blinked, and then he suddenly realized, and then he thought for a while and said, "I see. Pharaoh, your relationship with this high priest seems to be more complicated than I thought." The pharaoh just kept silent, but his eyes didn't blink, and he stared at Luaccio in front of him. After a long time, he suddenly asked, "I don't care who you are. You just have to answer my question. Can I believe you?" Luaccio thought for a while and didn't say anything. He just slowly took out the earring that Princess Yamana had given to him. The pharaoh of the kingdom suddenly became excited, and he walked forward. He even walked down a few steps, and then he suddenly stopped. His lips moved, and his voice even became a little hoarse. And he said softly, This is Yamana's mother's thing, the only thing she left for me." "Her Royal Highness's birth mother?" Boss Luo nodded. "I asked around. It seems that the pharaoh only has one princess now. No one seems to have mentioned the queen." The pharaoh of the kingdom shook his head, and then he slowly sat down. He was no longer sitting on the throne, but the stairs that led to the throne. He even seemed to be staggering. His voice was not only hoarse, but also sorrowful. She turned into a pile of sand in the end, and it was right in front of my eyes. The pharaoh of the kingdom slowly closed his eyes at this time, and sighed deeply, as if he was immersed in some kind of sad memory. "Your Royal Highness, the High Priest has ordered that you need to rest here tonight, and you can't leave." When Claudia was about to walk out of the bedroom, She was blocked by 2 white-robed guards. Of course, she was not as brave as the real Princess Yamana, who could fight against more than 10 white-robed guards and still hold on for a while. She was probably the type that would be beaten down in less than 3 seconds. So this royal highness could only leave in embarrassment, but she kept cursing the high priest in her heart. This high priest had the same appearance as her father, Siejadu, but now she knew that this high priest was not as good as those people in the City of the Sun said. This high priest actually turned the real Princess Yamanlana into a monster and trapped her. Claudia knew that she was the fake one. The high priest had probably recognized her when he saw her climbing down from the attic. But why didn't the high priest point it out? Why did he let the real Princess Yamana drink the holy water and turn her into that ugly monster? What was his real intention? Claudia walked back and forth in the room anxiously. The keyword, holy water, kept appearing in her mind at this time. He wants to let all the people in the city drink the holy water. Suddenly, a horrible conjecture occupied all of Claudia's mind. It was said that this high priest had left the temple in the kingdom some time ago, and no one knew where he went. He suddenly returned to the celebration banquet today. He didn't say that I was the fake one. He used the holy water to turn the real princess into a monster, saying that she was a giant beast. Claudia gradually felt a chill on her back. He wants everyone to drink the holy water. If the people who drink the holy water will turn into monsters, then everyone in the City of the Sun will become monsters. In an instant, Claudia realized a shocking conspiracy and exclaimed in a low voice, "Is this high priest? Is he the real giant beast? His purpose is to destroy the entire City of the Sun from the inside?" At this time, a figure quietly climbed into the room. "It seems that something unspeakable has happened to you." Claudia was startled and looked toward the source of the voice, only to see a figure leaning against a pillar with his arms crossed. It was Mr. Aota, who had snuck away in the crowd before the banquet started. "You bastard, how dare you? Wait, how did you come in?" Claudia suddenly frowned. In order to prevent her from leaving, the high priest had clearly arranged for white-robed guards with astonishing martial prowess to be stationed all around the palace. "Of course, I walked in openly. Mr. Otto didn't care at all. The 2 guards outside your room seemed to be asleep." Claudia naturally didn't believe him. She quickly walked to the door and opened it to take a look. She saw that the 2 white-robed guards were indeed on the ground. However, they clearly weren't asleep, but had fainted. She could tell that they had been knocked unconscious from their posture. This Ao, he had actually quietly taken away these 2 white-robed guards. "Where did you go?" Claudia turned around and hurried to Mr. Otto's side. "Do you know that a lot of things happened just now?" "I roughly know what happened." Mr. Otto nodded. "Her Royal Highness turned into a terrifying monster in front of everyone, right?" Claudia nodded. "And I suspect that this is a conspiracy of the High Priest. His purpose is actually—" Mr. Otto made a gesture of silence at this time. "Claudia, right? Professor Siejatu's daughter. What's wrong?" Claudia was suddenly stunned. Right, this Mr. Otto was not the one she saw when she came here, but the one who walked out of the oasis and lost part of his memory. Was it Otto from half a year ago? "I'm actually not very interested in what you found," Mr. Otto said indifferently. "I'm not very interested in what this Sun City will become. Because, please remember, no matter what this place becomes, no matter what happens here, we don't belong here. We're just travelers lost in this strange place. It's that simple." Claudia couldn't find a reason to refute Otto's words. Why should she care about what happened in this place? Why should she worry about the people in this Sun City? Was it just because she looked like the real Princess Yamalana, but she wasn't the real princess of the kingdom? "Leave here right now." Claudia suddenly shivered and blurted out. Mr. Otto smiled at this time. "That's the right choice. Yes, we should leave this place indeed." Taking advantage of the darkness and the fact that the 2 unconscious white-robed guards had yet to wake up, Mr. Otto and Claudia quietly left the palace that belonged to the princess. Slap, knock, angry roar. Imagine the appearance of a lion trapped in a narrow cage on the grassland. It was the appearance of the monster in the cage at this time. Monster? Princess Yamalana. Its eyes were cloudy, without any spirituality. It had been frantically trying to destroy the cage that imprisoned it. Its cries were like the sound of the wind passing through the canyon, loud and terrifying. But here, in this temple built in the depths of the palace, such a sound could not attract anyone. Outside the prison, there were elite white-robed guards of the temple. They stood tall and straight like statues, not moving at all. They didn't react until the high priest finally arrived, slowly opening the gate of the prison behind them. The high priest silently walked into the depths of the prison, standing in front of the cage, quietly looking at the crazy, ugly monster in the cage. The moment the monster saw him, it became more manic. Its hands grasped the iron bars of the cage, and its eyes suddenly became red. "Don't hate me, Yamalana," the high priest said slowly. Chapter 1534. The security of the palace had obviously become stricter. This was a far cry from the time when Claudia disguised herself as Princess Yamalana and sneaked into the palace. It was probably because of what happened at the banquet that the security of the palace had been strengthened. But Mr. Otto and Claudia's escape was still smooth so far. It was just that Claudia didn't get any information about her new classmates along the way, which was probably the only thing she was worried about. Maybe it was a kind of common feeling that they didn't belong to this place and came from the modern world. That Ivan, don't we need to care about him? Claudia suddenly remembered Ivan, who was knocked out by Otto and hid in the beginning. Otto said directly, "He is Ivan. The one I know is Arya. He's still outside the Oasis Temple." Claudia was silent for a moment before she said faintly, "Mr. Otto, can you really tell them apart? In these two worlds, there are people like me, people like Arya, and even what?" Otto turned around directly. Claudia opened her mouth. She wanted to say that there was even a high priest like her father, but when the words came to her mouth, it finally became, "Maybe there are people like you. So we should leave this place." Otto said expressionlessly, "If you keep staying in the false, one day even you will be assimilated by the false." Assimilated by the false. Claudia was startled. She seemed to have vaguely grasped something. When she was about to say something, she was interrupted by Otto, who was leading the way in front of her. At this time, seeing Mr. Otto standing in front of her, Claudia frowned subconsciously. "What happened?" "You hide yourself later," Mr. Otto said suddenly. "What do you mean?" Claudia was startled. At the same time, an arrow suddenly shot toward the ground in front of her. Looking at the trembling arrow that was inserted into the ground, she immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. It was the white-robe guards. On the road ahead, there were 5 white-robe guards. One of the white-robe guards was even holding a strange flute in his hand. He was playing the flute, obviously to gather more people. "Your Highness, the High Priestess invites you to return," the white-robe guard who played the flute said in a deep voice. "In addition, execute this fellow who intends to kidnap the princess." Claudia immediately asked in a low voice, "Can you deal with these guys?" She remembered that Ao had secretly knocked out the 2 white-robed guards. Although she was nervous, she did not panic. Otto replied to Claudia with an indescribable look. Then, without saying a word, his body suddenly moved. The first thing he did wasn't to push Claudia away, but to pull her in front of him instead. At the same time, he grabbed her neck and said, "Push me away, or else I won't be polite to this princess." Claudia reacted immediately and screamed, "Don't come over! This guy will really kill me. Don't come over! Don't come over! He's really going to kill me." Can you not talk?" Mr. Ao immediately whispered in her ear. "Why? I feel that I have completely shown the emotion of fear." Claudia moved her lips and said, "I really hope that you haven't joined the drama troupe in your school." Mr. Ao couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, the group of white-robed guards who didn't intend to cooperate at all took action under the command of their leader. Capture the woman alive. Kill the man. Facing the siege of several white-robed guards at the same time, Mr. obviously didn't dare to be too careless. He had to push Claudia away. He noticed the words these white-robed guards used. Woman. Obviously, in their eyes, they didn't treat Claudia as the princess at all. Even if the real Princess Yamalana was here, their attitude wouldn't change much. This group of white-robed guards with amazing strength was only loyal to the high priestess of the temple. Claudia was pushed aside, and Ao was surrounded by 5 white-robed guards alone. This was the first time she saw Ao Tuo's skill in person. She didn't expect him to be so good that he could fight against 5 white-robed guards alone with ease. But Mr. Ao couldn't hold on for long. In just a moment, more white-robed guards had been summoned by the sound of the flute. Facing the increased number of white-robed guards, no matter how powerful Mr. Ao Tuo was, he couldn't fight against 4 hands with 2 fists. Obviously, the white-robed guards also had a set of formations that they were familiar with, so they finally suppressed Mr. Ao Ta. At this time, Ao Tuo's hands were grabbed by 2 white-robed guards, and his legs were kicked at the same time, so he had to kneel on the ground. I'm still immortal after all. Mr. Ao couldn't help but smile bitterly when he saw that he couldn't move. He turned his head and took a look. Claudia's arms were also grabbed by 2 white-robed guards, and she couldn't get away. Seeing this, Ao Tuo could only sigh secretly. At this time, the white-robed guards suddenly moved aside, and the high priest of the temple slowly walked over. The high priest had changed into a black robe at this time. He didn't wear any accessories on his head, and his hair was naturally scattered, but there was a strange gentleness on his square face. The high priest walked to the front of the captured Ao Ta. Ao Ta looked up and couldn't help but frown deeply. Obviously, he recognized the high priest's appearance. Mr. Ao Ta subconsciously said, "How dare you? How dare you call the high priest by his name?" At this time, a white-robed guard ruthlessly slapped Mr. Ao Tuo's face. This slap was so strong that after Mr. Ao Ta was slapped, blood immediately flowed out of the corner of his mouth. Seeing that the white-robed guard was about to continue to beat him, the high priest suddenly waved his hand, and the white-robed guard respectfully took 2 steps back. The high priest then looked around. Although Ao Ta was captured, in order to capture him, there were actually 7 white-robed guards who were lying down around him. Although these white-robed guards didn't die, they were obviously seriously injured and couldn't recover in a short time. These white-robed guards are all the elites of the temple, and their skills are extraordinary. Under the siege of so many white-robed guards, not only can you hold on, you can even hit 7 of them. The high priest looked down at Ao. "I didn't expect you to be so good at fighting. It seems a bit of a pity to kill you like this." "What, respected high priest, are you interested in recruiting me, a prisoner who intends to kidnap the princess?" Mr. Ao Tuo said indifferently. "You will know soon." The high priest smiled slightly and then waved his hand. At this time, a white-robed guard came forward with a wooden stick and hit Ao Tuo's neck hard. This time, Ao didn't faint, so he hit him hard again. At this time, Ao Tuo slowly fell down and then was dragged away by the white-robed guards. When the high priest came in front of Claudia, she wanted to be very calm, but her body was more honest than expected. The high priest looked at her without saying a word. Claudia gradually panicked. Your Royal Highness is frightened." The high priest said softly, "Tonight, your Royal Highness was attacked by the giant beast, and now someone wants to kidnap you. It seems that the guards of the palace are too lax." Yes. Claudia found that she didn't dare to look at him, especially when she analyzed that this high priest was very likely to be the giant beast, the guy who wanted to destroy this sun city. The fear in her heart had long been firmly shrouded. "Guards, escort her Royal Highness back. This time, we must not let the thief have a chance to get close to her Royal Highness." The high priest said in a deep voice, "If there is one more time, you will walk into the punishment room and accept the punishment." For some reason, these white-robed guards who had always been expressionless showed a frightened look when they heard the punishment room. In Claudia's view, these guys who were like machines actually had something to fear, but she was still taken away by these white-robed guards. On the way back to the bedroom, Claudia subconsciously turned back, only to see that the high priestess didn't leave immediately. Instead, she stood in the same spot and silently watched her receding figure. Siegiatu. The high priest's name is also Siegetu? Is this a coincidence, or? Claudia couldn't tell for a moment, but she vaguely had a very special feeling. She felt that Siegetu, who was silently looking at her, and her father, Professor Siegetu, seemed to have suddenly overlapped. She was suddenly startled and remembered what Mr. Otto had said. If you're always in the midst of falsehood, one day even you will be assimilated by the falsehood. False! The fire lit up the dungeon. A white-robed guard fetched a pot of water and directly poured it on Mr. Otto. But this pot of water didn't wake Mr. Otto up. Just when the white-robed guard was about to fetch another pot of water, the high priest waved his hand and ordered, "All of you leave." "High priest, this person is powerless. I'm afraid." The white-robed guards were slightly shocked. The high priest shook his head and waved his hand again. These white-robed guards didn't dare to disobey and could only silently leave the dungeon. At this moment, the high priest walked up to Mr. Otto, who was chained up, and lowered his head to look at him. "Don't pretend. Open your eyes." The high priest suddenly said, "I have something to ask you." Mr. Otto didn't have any reaction and still kept his head down. The high priest waited for a moment and then said indifferently, "Do you know where this place is? This is the place that leads to the punishment room. The door behind you is the punishment room." Mr. Otto still didn't have any reaction. The high priest didn't care and continued, "The so-called punishment room is a place where the true God punishes sinners. In there, you won't encounter any physical torture. It's just a room with nothing inside. There's one thing." Mr. Otto still didn't have any reaction. The high priest said indifferently, "Except one thing. If you stay in the punishment room for a long time, you will see the most painful and regretful things in your life. No matter if you pierce your eyes or ears, these painful and regretful things will play in your mind again and again and never stop." Finally, Mr. Otto's breathing seemed to speed up a little, and his eyebrows frowned imperceptibly. The high priest smiled indifferently. "After those disobedient white-robed guards entered the punishment room, I only saw those guys who could only last for 3 days at most. Most of them would commit suicide in less than a day. Of course, you can think that I'm just deceiving you. What's the matter? Anyway, I plan to send you in and let you experience it for yourself. In fact, maybe I'm really deceiving you." Mr. Otto opened his eyes without warning, slowly raised his head, and smiled. It turns out that the high priest of the temple also has such a wicked side. "As a priest, I didn't expect you to like torturing others so much." The high priest said indifferently, "Torturing? That's not it. We just think that normally, only when a person is in a state of regret will they feel ashamed of the mistakes they made in the past. Only through mental torture can people realize the dividing line between right and wrong." Mr. Otto shrugged and said indifferently, "I don't know if the high priest has ever regretted and suffered." The high priest said indifferently, "The punishment room doesn't work on me because I'm the spokesperson of the true God." Mr. Otto was not angry, but showed a rather interesting look. "You are the high priest of the kingdom, and you have powerful white-robed guards. In the eyes of the people of the Sun City, your status is even higher than the pharaoh here. You're also the spokesperson of the true God. I'm very curious why you still let this pharaoh exist. You can completely control this country on your own. The country needs a manager, and the temple needs an agent." The high priest shook his head and said, "Between the two, there may not necessarily be a conflict." Mr. Otto raised his eyebrows and said, "Haven't the high priest heard of the divine right of kings? It seems—" The high priest looked at Mr. Otto meaningfully and smiled. "You seem to be a loyal believer of the divine right." Mr. Otto said bluntly, "After all, a mortal's body can't be compared to a god. Since a mortal's body can't be compared to a god, why not support a god to obtain power beyond mortals?" "You want to get extraordinary power?" The high priest asked curiously why. Mr. Otto said slowly, "Probably because I've lived for a long time, so I want to try everything." The high priest frowned. He looked at Mr. Otto seriously for a while, and then said slowly, "In fact, you have already told me this answer once." "What did you say?" Mr. Otto couldn't help but frown. At the same time, an unknown fear suddenly surged in his heart. What I said is not important. The high priest shook his head. What's important is that it's time for you to leave here. Otto. Mr. Otto suddenly widened his eyes, and in an instant, he blurted out, You are Siegidu, Professor. Chapter 1535. In the middle of the night, the palace was still heavily guarded. A figure was sneaking around the palace slowly and fearfully. Ivan, the real Ivan. He touched the back of his neck and felt that it was very painful. He had forgotten what had happened. He only knew that when he woke up, he found himself hiding in a large water tank. The fake princess and the other two fellows who had sneaked into the palace with him were gone. What had happened? Ivan was in a state of complete isolation, but he vaguely felt that he had missed a lot of things, especially since the palace was so heavily guarded. Fortunately, he was wearing a guard's uniform. Stop! At this moment, a deep shout came from behind him. Ivan was startled and his body stiffened. He swallowed his saliva and slowly turned around. He saw a group of 6 palace guards approaching with weapons in hand. They happened to be patrolling the area and saw Ivan sneaking around. This Ivan was quick-witted. He put his hands on his belt and pretended to be tying it. He also put on a bowing smile on his face. The patrolling guards frowned when they saw him. The leader even said angrily, Are you crazy? This is the palace. Too hasty, too hasty. I have no choice, brother. Ivan looked aggrieved. You see, I haven't rested all night. Can you make an exception? Humph. However, the leader of this group of patrolling guards did not believe him. He immediately waved his hand and said in a deep voice, Now, the guards patrolling the palace are in groups of 6. Yet, you are here alone and acting so sneakily. I suspect that you are also a giant beast in disguise. Catch him. As soon as the leader of the guards pulled out his sword, the other 5 guards also pulled out their weapons. Don't come over. Seeing this, Ivan knew that he wouldn't be able to let this go so easily. He clenched his teeth and imitated the guards. He placed his hand on his waist and prepared for a life and death struggle. Well, he didn't have a weapon on his waist. Catch him. The leader waved his hand. The 5 guards rushed toward Ivan. Ivan was scared out of his wits. He turned around and ran away, but he was not familiar with the palace. After a while, he turned into a dead end. Ivan was startled and gritted his teeth. At this time, he couldn't care about anything else. He desperately climbed up the wall, and before the guards behind him could catch up, he flipped over the wall. The guards hurriedly stopped outside the wall, with a strange look on their faces. The leader's face was ugly, as if he had eaten a dead rat. This is... A guard looked at the leader hesitantly. The former queen's residence. Us. Damn it. The leader gritted his teeth. Chase him. We are chasing a criminal. Don't be afraid. You go in first. The subordinates, they still went in from other places. They walked into this palace with many rumors and fear. It was said that the former queen did not just die here, but her resentful spirit did not disappear after her death and stayed in this palace. Ivan didn't do a good job when he climbed over the wall. Of course, he decided not to do it again, even though the consequence of this was that he fell in a very indecent way, and it was very painful. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Grabbing his waist, Ivan crawled up in a sorry state. He scanned his surroundings and found that there were no lights. Not only was it not as bright as the palace at night, but it was also unexpectedly filled with an icy cold feeling. He shivered subconsciously and quickly put his ear to the wall to listen to the movements of the palace guards outside the wall. After a while, when he heard the sound of hurrying away, Ivan was slightly relieved. What is this place? However, the surroundings were too dark, and he couldn't see the road clearly. He could only feel his way forward. Darkness always made people fall into an atmosphere of fear. As Ivan walked, he felt a chill in his heart. He felt like there was a pair of eyes watching him from behind. He looked back several times and seemed to see a strange shadow floating in front of him. Ivan was shocked and scared. He didn't know where he was in this dark palace. He was completely lost. At this moment, there was a flash of fire in front of him. Ivan was overjoyed and hurriedly walked toward the light source. Unexpectedly, he met the leader and his subordinates who had been chasing him all the way. Ivan cursed his bad luck. Seeing that the 6 guards seemed to have discovered him at this time and were desperately running toward him, Ivan couldn't help but sigh. He simply stopped running and let these guys catch him. It was not because he couldn't outrun these guards, but because he had been seen by the guards anyway. This Sun City was located in the desert, and there were giant beasts around. There was no possibility of escaping. Sooner or later, he would be caught. Instead of hiding everywhere, it was better to eat a few months in prison. The price of real estate in this Sun City was ridiculously high. Young people simply couldn't survive. In today's Sun City, the only way out for young people was to go to prison. They didn't have to pay for food, they had a place to sleep, and their friends in prison were nice to hear. Brothers, I was wrong. I surrender. I am willing to go to prison. Can you give me a better cell? Wow, you don't have to welcome me so warmly, right? The 6 guards didn't intend to stop at this time. They crazily ran to Ivan and even pushed him away, with a look of horror. What happened? After being pushed away, Ivan fell to the ground and rubbed the painful place. He hurriedly got up and suddenly gasped. He suddenly understood what these guards were afraid of just now. What appeared in front of him was a tall figure, gray, furry, with huge fangs and scarlet eyes, and a face like an evil ghost. In the darkness, when such a terrible thing suddenly appeared in front of him, Ivan instinctively blacked out. But in an instant, he was so scared that he directly fell down. Plop! That strange thing, at this time, looked down at Ivan, who was lying motionless on the ground. After a while, seeing that Ivan still didn't respond, it simply bent down and stretched out its hand, directly grabbing Ivan's ankle and slowly dragging him into the deeper part of the palace. After the 6 guards hurriedly ran out of the place where the former queen lived, they all breathed a sigh of relief, but their faces were still full of fear. I already said it's really fierce inside. You see, for so many years, not many people are willing to go in. Not to mention the pharaoh himself. Even the maids are not willing to come in to clean. What should we do now? Will the vengeful spirit of the empress come after us? We have violated her resting place. At this time, the head of the guards said in a deep voice, "Listen to me. No one is allowed to speak of what happened tonight. If anyone speaks of it, don't blame me for not showing mercy." As he said this, the head of the guards suddenly pulled out the saber at his waist and fiercely chopped at the tree beside the road. The saber cut into the trunk in an instant. It was not shallow at all. The guards immediately nodded their heads and kept their mouths shut. After all, this was the former empress' former residence. The pharaoh had already given the order that no one was allowed to enter without his permission. Previously, they were only here to capture the person and gain merit. After capturing the person, they only planned to say that it was a suspected giant beast that they had caught outside. Strange, didn't the priests in the temple say that they had already seen this place and said that there was nothing here? Why is the former queen's resentful spirit still here? Shut up. I already said, no one is allowed to speak of this matter again. Do you see my saber here? The head of the guards pointed at the saber that was still hanging on the tree trunk and said. Everyone kept quiet out of fear and did not dare to say anything more. After that, the head of the guards then let the few of them split up and look around to see if anyone would discover that they had sneaked into the former queen's residence, while he stayed here and watched. Actually, the saber that was chopped at the tree trunk could not be pulled out. He looked back at the dark palace behind him and felt that the darkness in front of him was like the mouth of a giant beast of unknown size. At this time, it was opening wide and was swallowing this palace. Why can't I pull it out? Claudia once again paced back and forth in the room of the real Princess Royal Highness. There were still white-robed guards outside the door, and there were twice as many of them as before. Suddenly, the door opened, and a maid walked in slowly with a tray. There was no food on the tray, only a flask of wine and a cup. Just as Claudia was about to speak, her expression abruptly changed. This was because another person had walked in after the maid. The high priest of the kingdom, the man who looked exactly like her father, and even had the same name as him. The high priest was still in his black robe, expressionless, and no one could tell what he was thinking. Claudia subconsciously took 2 steps back. After the maid put down the tray, She was directly called out by the high priest. At this time, only Claudia and the high priest were left in the room. The high priest did not say anything and only silently poured the contents of the flask into the cup, then placed it like this. The meaning was very clear. He wanted Claudia to drink the contents of the cup. Claudia was shocked, but she forced a smile and said, What is this? It can make you forget a lot of troublesome things. The high priestess clasped her hands in her wide sleeves. She didn't get close. She just said calmly, Drink it, and you will have a completely different life. Very soon, you will not feel sad anymore. Come, drink it. The high priest's eyes seemed to have an inconceivable magic, causing Claudia to feel a little dizzy. She felt that all of her thoughts and reactions had fallen into a swamp. She wanted to struggle, but the dizziness was getting stronger and stronger. Claudia's throat swelled. By the time she reacted, she had already unknowingly walked to the front of the table. She had even raised the cup and was slowly bringing it to her mouth. Claudia was shocked. She was so shocked that cold sweat broke out all over her body. Her hand trembled, and she knocked the cup over. Some light green liquid flowed out of the cup. Claudia felt terrified at this time and said with a trembling voice, How could I be so careless? I am sorry, High Priest. I have let you down. No, but I feel that I'm actually quite happy now. I don't need to drink this kind of thing that can make me happy. Ha ha, ha. She felt that she could not continue speaking and even wanted to turn around and run away. But reality did not allow this to happen. However, the high priestess was not angry at all. She just silently picked up the cup, picked up the pot, and filled the cup with light green liquid again. It's okay, there's still a lot here. If you accidentally knock these over, I still have a lot more than enough. This time, the high priestess directly placed the cup in front of Claudia. That feeling of dizziness struck Claudia once again. She subconsciously reached out her hand to receive it. Her hand was trembling, as though she was making a final struggle. Believe me, I will not hurt you. My princess, the high priest said softly. The gentle voice instantly overlapped with the image of her father in Claudia's memories. In an instant, her last bit of rationality crumbled. Her hands finally stopped trembling. She received the cup steadily and was about to drink it. The high priest's eyes gradually became gentler. Suddenly, he froze. Claudia, who was about to drink the liquid in the cup, suddenly threw the cup in her hand at the high priest. The liquid spilled out and splashed onto the high priest's black robe, drenching it in an instant. The high priest lowered his head to look at his robe and slowly exhaled. He glanced at Claudia. Claudia's lips were dripping with blood at this time. Obviously, in order to sober herself up, she used the last bit of rationality to bite her lips fiercely. Drink something that will make people forget their happiness. I think this is the damn holy water. Claudia threw caution to the wind at this time. Although her face was pale, I saw it with my own eyes. It was you. It was you who turned the real Princess Yamelana into a monster. It was you. This is not the holy water at all. This is clearly poison. Do you think so? The high priest's expression still looked indifferent. What giant beast disguised as the princess to sneak into the palace and destroy the temple? This is all a lie. Claudia screamed at this time. I think you are the real giant beast. You want to use the holy water to make everyone in the city become like Princess Yamelana. You are a demon. Facing Claudia's accusation, the high priest opened his mouth and then showed a bitter smile. His voice seemed to be a little tired, and he said slowly, I never realized that your imagination is so good. Claudia, what have you been through these days? My imagination is good? I'm just basing it on. Wait. Claudia couldn't help but be shocked at this time, and then she fell into a trance. What did you call me? Her name. How did he know? Chapter 1536. Claudia only felt a chill all over her body. There were some things she didn't even want to think about, but in addition to her body trembling uncontrollably in fear, there was also her mind. Her mind was running uncontrollably. How did the high priestess know her name? She had never revealed her real name to anyone in the City of the Sun. Even Ibn had mistaken her for Princess Yamanlana at the beginning. Therefore, in theory, there were only two people in Sun City who knew her name, Otto and Luaccio. Otto had been caught by the high priest in front of her eyes, and as for Luaccio, he was still uncontactable. Could it be that under the high priest's interrogation, Otto had already told her everything, including the fact that they actually came from the outside world of Sun City? No, it's not like that. In fact, there is another possibility. A possibility that she subconsciously didn't want to believe and even instinctively didn't want to verify. The high priest in front of her and her father, Professor Siegeru, were the same person. This could even easily explain a lot of things. For example, the artifact that Princess Yamalana had. It was clearly a gun made by humans outside. It was brought to this Sun City by his father, Professor Siegeru, and he gave it to Princess Yamalana, claiming that it was a gift from the true god. For example, why was someone who looked like Arya called Ibn here, while the Grand Shaman used the same name, regardless of whether he was here or outside? Even at this moment, the high priest revealed a feeling that Claudia was very familiar with. Earlier, she quietly planned to sneak away from the banquet attic. When she first met the high priest, it was because of this feeling that made her jump into his arms without hesitation. Who are you? Countless questions emerged in Claudia's mind. Is the man in front of her the real high priest? Or is the beast pretending to be the high priest? Or is he the real Professor Siegeru? The high priest said indifferently at this time, Claudia, don't you believe in me? I believe. Claudia only felt the feeling of dizziness hit her again, and it was unusually heavy. Her eyelids gradually closed, and finally, her vision turned black, and she completely lost consciousness. Her body fell, but before she hit the ground, the high priestess took a step forward and supported her body. I'm Siegeru. The high priest whispered in Claudia's ear, no matter where I am, I only have one identity. He helped Claudia onto the bed and took out the flask again. Then, he slowly poured the liquid into her mouth. Not long after, the high priest left the princess's chamber and prepared to return to the temple. Tonight is much longer than usual. The high priest suddenly stopped and stared at the moon in the night sky. The white-robed guard beside him stepped forward and said, Perhaps it's because the longest night is approaching. The high priest suddenly said, When the day of the longest night arrives, it will be the day of God's death. As the white-robed guard approached, he naturally heard what the high priest had said. His expression immediately changed as he looked at the black-robed man in front of him in shock and fear. His forehead was unknowingly covered in fine beads of sweat. It's just a joke. The high priest glanced at him casually and said in an unexpected tone, After all, in the entire Sun City, only I can make this kind of joke. If I don't say it, how can you hear it? Hi, high priest. The white-robed guard felt a chill run down his spine. The high priest shook his head and walked away with his hands behind his back. In his black robe, he soon merged with the darkness before dawn. Iben actually woke up halfway, but when he found that he was actually dragged forward by that terrifying guy, he was instantly scared and fainted again. So this was the second time he woke up. His nerves naturally adapted to the current fear a little bit. The surrounding walls were made of stone, so it wasn't dark at all. Instead, it was unusually bright. The light from the fire, the light from the oil lamp. A huge shadow was now on the wall behind Iben, standing side by side with him. He looked at the huge shadow on the wall in horror, and his neck stiffened. He immediately bit his finger and moved his eyes bit by bit. Finally, he saw the source of this huge shadow. It came from the light from the fire. It was the terrifying guy who dragged him to this place. Iben could only see the back of that thing clearly. Its back was full of coarse gray hair. Iben swore that he had never seen anything with such hair in his memory. Its back was facing Iben, and it seemed to be eating something. Beside it was a pile of scattered gray bones. Judging from the different degrees of decay of these bones, this terrifying thing seemed to have lived here for a while. These were all human bones. Iben's teeth couldn't help but start to tremble. He swallowed his saliva, and while this terrifying thing was eating with its back to him, He quietly got up and moved his feet, walking to the place that seemed to be the door. After 2 steps, Ivan looked back in fear. Seeing that this terrifying thing was still eating and didn't care about him, he secretly sighed in relief and continued to move forward quietly. After a few times, the door was finally in front of him. Ivan couldn't help but become more nervous. He reached his hand to the door, preparing to push it open and then run away recklessly. He didn't want to become this monster's food. But at this moment, bang! Something knocked on the wall. Ivan was startled, instinctively holding his head and squatting on the ground, screaming in horror, "Don't eat me! Don't eat me! I haven't eaten a thing in my stomach today. I really don't taste good." Cluck, cluck, cluck. Something seemed to roll to Ivan's feet. He opened his eyes and saw that it was a bone that hadn't been eaten completely. It looked like a leg bone or something. Ivan's eyes suddenly turned dark. It seemed that he was about to faint again. But the terrifying thing with gray hair suddenly stood up. "This time, if you fall asleep again, I will consider eating you." Don't eat. Ivan was lying on the ground, begging for mercy in horror, but now he suddenly raised his head. Did he hear it wrong? This terrifying fellow could actually speak? Ivan's eyes widened, and his body couldn't help but tremble. But the appearance of the person gradually became clear. He finally saw the person's appearance, a body covered in long gray fur. It turned out to be the fur of an unknown beast that was draped over his body. This fellow was clearly a human. It was a guy wearing animal skin and a mask made from the skull of a strange beast. The beast's skull mask made this guy look very terrifying, especially in the dim environment. "You?" Ivan opened his mouth, and after knowing that the person was a human, he couldn't help but feel relieved and sat on the ground as if all his strength had been drained. He pressed his palm on the bone that rolled over. Ivan subconsciously picked it up and found that it wasn't a human bone. It seemed to be a cow bone. The other party didn't say anything and just sat down in front of Ivan, wearing the beast skin and the beast skull. He looked much bigger than Ivan. The pressure made Ivan, who had relaxed a little, tense up again. After a while, "This, brother?" Ivan asked tentatively. How should I address you?" "Night Watcher." He suddenly said a name. "You can call me by my name, Night Watcher." "Night Watcher?" Ivan nodded subconsciously, looked around and pointed. Where is this?" Ivan was a little confused by the attitude of the Night Watcher, but he still replied indifferently. "This is the basement of the former queen's bedroom." "The former queen?" Ivan jumped up in shock and said exaggeratedly, "Here?" The Night Watcher just glanced at him casually and did not have much reaction. Ivan calmed down, sat down again, and said to himself, "I heard that the former queen died suddenly, and no one knows the cause of death. There are many rumors that the former queen was killed by someone, and her soul has been staying in the place where she used to live after she died." Ivan quietly looked at the Night Watcher in front of him and said subconsciously, "It is said that something terrible will appear in the former queen's bedroom. Could be you? I didn't know before." The Night Watcher said indifferently, "But now, it is probably me. Who are you? Why are you hiding here and pretending to be like this to scare the palace people?" Ivan couldn't help but frown. The Night Watcher said indifferently, "Compared to this, why are you here? You are a palace guard. Don't you know that this is a forbidden area and no one is allowed to enter?" Ivan leaned against the wall and said with a smile, "Others are others, and I am me. How is it the same?" "Brother, if you want to know, it's simple. Tell me where you come from first." The Night Watcher shook his head. "Then don't say it. Anyway, if you stay here for a long time, you will definitely not be able to hold back. You look like the type who can't keep secrets." "You are a King, big mouth." Ivan was not happy. He sneered and suddenly jumped up. "Let me see what you look like. You're just pretending to be a ghost. Today, I will teach you what a master is." 3 seconds later. "Ouch, ouch, ouch. Hero, please spare me. I was wrong, okay? Not good." The Night Watcher sneered. At this moment, he sat on Ivan's body and casually picked up a bloody bone that was still attached to the flesh and began to gnaw on it. Ivan didn't know that he was so weak that he was finished off in a few moves. He wanted to cry, but had no tears. He kept begging for mercy, and finally, he told the night watcher why he was here. That's what happened. Ivan stretched his body with both hands and tried to look back at the night watcher who was sitting on him. Brother, can you not sit on me? Can't. The night watcher threw away the bone in his hand. After wiping the blood on his mouth, he asked indifferently, You said that in addition to you, there were 3 people who sneaked into the palace with you, and one of them looked exactly like Princess Yamelana. Were they? Didn't I tell you? Ivan said helplessly. I don't know how I fainted, and after I woke up, I ran to this place. I don't know. Brother, can you get up first, my waist? The night watcher ignored Ivan's croaking. He muttered to himself, Princess Yamelana? Did someone else come in from outside? Outside? What outside? Ivan said subconsciously. Outside the palace? Who else is there besides us? The night watcher ignored him, stood up directly, and then walked to the corner of the basement, which was covered with a huge cloth. The night watcher lifted the cloth, revealing the things inside. Ibn had never seen many of these things before, but there was one thing that looked very familiar to him. Abruptly, Ibn slapped his head and exclaimed, Divine artifact, divine artifact. You also have a divine artifact? Crack. The night watcher swiftly loaded the black pistol in Ibn's hand with a bullet clip. Brother, who the hell are you? Ibn approached and asked nervously. The night watcher glanced at him and pointed the divine artifact at Ivan and pressed it against his forehead. Ivan raised his hand subconsciously. Oh, brother, I shouldn't ask. The night watcher suddenly said, Ivan, right? Ivan nodded subconsciously. Go ahead. The night watcher said directly, Now there's a chance to make a lot of money. There's a chance to get a great fortune in front of you. Do you want it? A great fortune? Ivan was suddenly spirited, even forgetting the fear brought by the divine artifact on his forehead. His eyes lit up. What's that? Accompany me to kill the high priest. The night watcher sneered. Ivan blinked and then fainted on the ground, motionless. The night watcher raised his foot and was about to step on Ivan's crotch. Ivan hurriedly rolled to one side, scrambled up in a panic, and said with a bitter face, Brother, I need to be alive to enjoy the great fortune you mentioned. Kill the high priest? Am I crazy? What if I say, as long as you can kill the high priest, I could take you out of Sun City, or even, the night watcher said in a low voice, out of this desert? Ivan, chapter 1537. Then, under Ivan's shocked and horrified gaze, the night watcher gave him a weapon. It was the same weapon as the princess, but he didn't know why it was silver. Desert Eagle, the name of this gun. The night watcher gave a simple explanation. There are only 7 bullets. Use them sparingly. The princess always had the divine weapon, and it was the most powerful weapon she used to defeat the giant beasts. Ivan didn't expect that he would have a divine weapon one day. Desert Eagle. Both of his hands were trembling as he held the silver pistol. It was clearly a cold gun, but it made him feel as if it was burning his hands. He said with a trembling voice, I don't know how to use it. The night watcher glanced at Ivan and said casually, When you need it, you will naturally use it. Even if your brain forgets, your body's instinct will still be there. What do you mean? Nothing. The night watcher shook his head and walked toward the door of the underground stone room. Let's go. The chance to get rich is not always there. If you don't pay attention, it will slip through your fingers. Poverty can make people crazy, and I believe you can do the same. Ivan licked his lips, and his eyes were filled with the endless pursuit of wealth, the most primitive desire. To put it simply, he wanted money more than his life. Also, he could leave this damn place and not be threatened by the giant beasts anymore. Wait, what is there in the outside world? Ivan quickly chased after the night watcher and asked, Is there an endless supply of fresh fruits? Is there an endless supply of water and honey? Is there everything you can imagine? Everything you can imagine there is. The night watcher turned around and replied, It is a beautiful world. A beautiful world, a beautiful world, a beautiful world. Ivan kept repeating this sentence as if he was possessed. A beautiful world. Suddenly, This silver divine weapon didn't seem to be so hot anymore. He was a complete madman. After he forgot his initial fear, his brain started to work quickly. "Oh, honorable night watcher, your most loyal servant, Ivan, is at your service. How can we kill the high priest?" "There is a place," the night watcher said in a low voice. "There is a place that is suitable for us to make a move. Don't ask about the rest. Just remember one thing. Wait for my signal, and don't hesitate to use the gun in your hand." "Understood." Ibn nodded. While he was nervous, he also seemed to be a little excited. It was not difficult to leave the former empress' residence, especially after knowing that there was no vengeful spirit of the former empress. Ibn felt much more relaxed. When they were about to walk out, Ibn couldn't help but ask curiously, "Speaking of which, how did the former queen die?" "I heard that the pharaoh and the former queen were very loving." But Ibn observed the surroundings of his residence. Not only was it dark, but it also looked as if no one had cleaned it for a long time. It was as if this was a room that had been completely forgotten. But from the looks of it, the pharaoh doesn't seem to love his queen very much. No, the night watcher, who had always given Ibn the impression of a cold person, seemed to have some fluctuations in his voice. "The pharaoh's longing for his wife is stronger than any of you can imagine. This is a longing that comes from the depths of his soul. I can feel it." Ibn pursed his lips behind his back, as if he didn't agree. "What you feel is not the taste of love, but the sour smell of a house that has not been cleaned for many years, right? So, you seem to know how the former empress died?" It seemed that no matter which era people were from, they all had something in common. The soul of gossip that pushed humans to evolve was now burning in Ibn's heart. "The pharaoh killed her with his own hands." Unexpectedly, the night watcher gave Ibn an unbelievable answer. Ibn laughed subconsciously and patted the night watcher's shoulder. "Ha ha ha, brother, you also know how to joke? I didn't know that the pharaoh would kill his queen with his own hands. You were telling the truth. Who knows if it's true or not?" The night watcher said indifferently. "He said it himself." "He said it to you?" Ibn frowned. The night watcher said indifferently, "Usually no one comes to this place, but the pharaoh will come here himself, quietly. He will sit in the empress room and repent. During this period of time, I temporarily stayed in the basement and occasionally heard some of it. Of course, it's up to you to believe it or not. Anyway, no matter how the former empress died, it has nothing to do with me. I only have one goal. Kill the high priest and leave this place." Ibn asked subconsciously. The night watcher suddenly stopped, and Ibn bumped into him due to inertia. "Brother?" The night watcher waved his hand and pulled Ibn to a corner to hide. They were about to reach the exit of the palace, and they could even vaguely see the stars in the night sky. The night watcher put his finger near his ear and then looked up. He even held a strange item in his hand and placed it in front of his eyes, facing the ceiling above the palace. Night vision goggles? For some reason, this name suddenly appeared in Ibn's mind. He was quite surprised because he had never seen such a thing before. How'd he know the name of this thing? "So there is one here. Heh, you are so careful." The night watcher sneered. "You think you'll be absolutely safe if you hide behind it. Naive." "What did you find?" Ibn asked hurriedly. The night watcher slowly took out a black, divine artifact and put a short black barrel on it. Then, he suddenly fired a shot at the ceiling above the palace. The sound was not particularly loud, but it was not soft in this particularly quiet corridor. Ibn was startled, fearing that the sound would attract the other guards in the palace. He was so scared that his face turned pale. But at this moment, there was a sudden sound in front of him. It seemed that something fell from the ceiling above. He subconsciously walked forward and saw that it was a palm-sized metal box. There were a few leaf-like things in the four corners of the metal box. In an instant, a new name suddenly appeared in Ibn's mind. Drone. This is... Ibn picked up the metal box on the ground. Drone. He looked up at the night watcher nervously. "You shot this thing down?" At this time, the night watchman said casually, "There are many legends about the high priest in the city of the sun. Legend has it that he knows everything. No matter what happens in the city of the sun, no matter what bad things those people do, They can't escape the eyes of the high priest. He always judges everyone in the most fair way, right? That's right. Ibn nodded, and this is a fact. The high priest never makes a mistake. But what does it matter if he knows this thing? This is the secret that your high priest has never made a mistake. The night watcher lowered his head and glanced at Ibn. Because what you're holding now is the high priest's eye. Ibn was startled. His hands trembled, and he directly threw the drone to the ground. What eye? The night watcher said, I don't have time to explain too much to you. You must act as soon as possible. Since an outsider came in, it means that the exit channel was opened recently. If I miss this chance, I don't know how long I will have to wait. Don't talk nonsense. This is the deposit for you. With that, the night watcher took out something from his fur clothes and threw it directly into Ibn's hand. This was a golden coin that was purer than all the gold he had ever seen in the City of the Sun, but it was engraved with an unknown portrait. I like gold coins. Ibn's eyes suddenly lit up. Oh, great, night watcher, please order me around like a camel. Royal Palace, Princess Yamanlana's bedroom. Looking at the night, the latter half of the night was about to pass. The maid of the royal palace suddenly woke up and then hurriedly looked around. She was relieved when she found that it was not dawn yet. The maid had to make a lot of preparations before dawn. She hurriedly fetched a basin of water and prepared to bring it into the room for Princess Yamanlana to freshen up. In front of the door of the princess room, several white-robed guards stood like statues. The maid blinked her eyes. These white-robed guards were so energetic that they had been standing like this for the whole night. I'm here to fetch water for the princess. The white-robed guard nodded and directly led her in. She came to the door and gently pushed open the door of the bedroom. In the first half of the night, the high priest brought some medicine that could help the princess sleep. After that, the princess fell asleep peacefully. When the little maid walked into the inner room, she found that the lights were already on. Her Royal Highness the princess had already woken up. The princess was now standing in front of a huge mirror made of gold, and her body was naked. Seeing this, the maid hurriedly fetched clothes and put them on the princess. Your Highness, there are white-robed guards outside. At this time, Her Royal Highness only turned back to look at the little maid. Her brows were slightly furrowed. The kind of cold and sharp gaze immediately made the little maid's heart thump. She hurriedly lowered her head and took 2 steps back. How long have I been sleeping? The princess' voice was not loud, but it had a majesty that made the maid feel awe. Your Highness, after the high priest left, you have been sleeping until now. It's almost dawn, the maid hurriedly replied. The high priest. The princess frowned. The high priest came back? When? Why don't I remember? In the first half of the night, the maid looked up and said in confusion, Your Highness, don't you remember? Last night, during the celebration party, you were attacked by a giant beast. The giant beast then turned into your appearance and tried to kill the temple and the pharaoh. Everyone was almost scared to death. Fortunately, the high priest came in time and exposed the giant beast and saved you. Giant beast, me? Her Royal Highness rubbed the space between her eyebrows as if she was tired. She slowly sat down. I don't remember. I should have just returned and quarreled with SBHYNX Cat over the celebration banquet. Why would I attend the banquet? Your Highness. The maid thought for a while and said, Your Highness, after being attacked by the giant beast last night, did you get hurt somewhere? So you forgot what happened last night? The princess suddenly stood up and hurriedly walked to her bed. She lifted the blanket and saw the divine artifact on the bed. She subconsciously let out a sigh of relief. Your Highness? The maid did not understand. The princess shook her head. My mind is a little confused. I seem to have some recollection of what you said. Wait for me to wake up. Your Highness has just woken up. Are you in a daze? The little maid chuckled, but the princess casually glanced at her. Only then did the little maid lower her head in fear and trepidation. Then, she couldn't help but raise her head to size up the princess in front of her. Is there something on my face? After noticing the maid's gaze, the princess frowned again. The maid quickly shook her head and said hurriedly, No, I just think that your Highness is really beautiful and very handsome. I feel that your Highness is normal. I don't know what you were talking about. The princess shook her head and then thought for a while and said, I still can't remember. Come, put on my clothes. I want to go out. The sun is not up yet. Where are you going, Your Highness? The maid asked curiously. The temple. The princess said indifferently, Since the high priest is back, I need to see him and discuss some important matters with him. But it's not dawn yet. Okay, I got it. The little maid hurriedly took the princess's clothes from the cupboard and brought it over. At this time, the princess walked in front of the golden mirror again and looked at herself. She lowered her head and touched her body. Why do I feel a little? Your Highness, your skin is so good. The maid said enviously. The princess's frown deepened. She was not the kind of princess who hid in the palace to enjoy life, but a warrior who would go out with the soldiers to fight the giant desert beast. Skin. How could her skin be so smooth? Later on, that giant beast that could transform, was it killed? I don't know. The maid shook her head, but the high priest asked the white-robed guards to bring it back to the temple. I heard that it was to be studied. Anyway, I'm not very clear. The pharaoh said that this matter is not to be mentioned again. The pharaoh. The princess frowned and thought for a while before saying indifferently, Before going to the temple, I will go to the pharaoh's palace. You can send someone to inform him first. Oh, okay. The maid pursed her lips and smiled. Although they often quarreled and even went tit for tat, the princess still cared about the pharaoh. What are you smiling about? No, nothing. The princess shook her head and was about to go out when she suddenly stopped, then pointed at the thing beside the bed and asked, Oh, right. When was this oil lamp placed here? Oil lamp? The maid was stunned, then thought for a while and said, Your Highness, this oil lamp was brought back by you, right? Then, I left it here. Princess Royal Highness subconsciously picked up the oil lamp and looked at it casually. It's just an ordinary oil lamp. Why did I bring it with me? She frowned. After waking up, she felt that everything was filled with a strange and even incongruous feeling. Chapter 1538. She picked up the oil lamp. From casual to careful, it gave her a strange feeling. It was as if someone was telling her to bring this oil lamp with her, because it might bring her good luck. The princess shook her head and thought that it was a ridiculous idea. She put down the oil lamp, turned around, and walked toward the door. But just as she was about to leave the dormitory, the princess suddenly turned back and hung the oil lamp on her belt as if it was an accessory. The oil lamp wasn't big, and it even had a small feel to it. Hanging on her waist, although it looked a little out of the ordinary, it wasn't too eye-catching, not to mention that the princess had covered the existence of the oil lamp with her cloak. Your Highness! The little maid did not understand the princess's action. It's nothing. The princess said indifferently, Let's go. I'll go see Pharaoh first. She actually wanted to call her father. Then, she became Pharaoh. Ibn felt that the so-called eye that the night watcher shot down might be very valuable, so he did not care about the night watcher's disdainful gaze. He put the eye-called drone into his pocket and planned to use it to fool others after leaving the palace. There were many collectors in the city. No one had seen this kind of thing before. It would definitely sell for a high price. Ibn could not help but laugh when he thought of this. It was as if he saw a bunch of rich people standing in front of him. By the way, you said that this is the eye of the high priest. Ibn thought of what the night watcher said and asked curiously, How did you know? The night watcher ignored Ibn and gradually sped up. Ibn could not help but be stunned by how familiar he was with the palace. Along the way, he did not see any palace guards, and he did not even see any places with lights. It felt like he had walked for a long time, but it also felt like he had just walked for a while. A towering object appeared in front of Ibn. It was a trapezoidal pyramid-like building. Temple. Temple? As a resident of the City of the Sun, Ibn naturally recognized the origin of this building. Every resident of the City of the Sun was eligible to enter the temple several times in their life. When they were born, on the day they came of age, and after they died, when the residents died, they would be sent to the temple to be cremated. They would be cremated in the place closest to the true God, allowing their souls to be attached to the true God's side, and they would be able to rest in peace. This was an ancient tradition of the City of the Sun. In Ibn's memory, he was already an adult, So his impression of the temple was so clear. The Night Watcher wanted to kill the high priest, and the high priest was naturally in the temple, so it was not a problem to come to the temple now. However, the reverence hidden in his heart made Ibn, who was blinded by wealth, hesitate. "Brother, why don't we discuss it again?" Ibn grabbed the Night Watcher's arm and said, "This place is not like the palace. Each of the white-robed guards is a warrior who can fight against 10 warriors. Do you think the two of us are afraid?" "You're right." The Night Watcher nodded. "This is the high priest's nest. It's unrealistic to sneak in." "I knew it." Ibn was overjoyed. "Let's go back and think about it." He happily turned around. He still remembered the way he came, so he did not panic at all. At this time, the Night Watcher took out a fist-sized thing and threw it directly at the wall that was blocking the way. Boom! A sudden sound came from behind Ibn, and a gust of wind hit Ibn's back, causing his clothes to flutter. He hurriedly turned around and saw a sea of fire in front of him. The wall that separated the temple from the palace had a large hole. The Night Watcher stood in front of Ibn and said, "Anyway, it's more troublesome to sneak in, so we might as well fight our way in." Fight our way in." Ibn's eyes turned black, and he almost fainted on the ground. He cursed, You lunatic! Only lunatics have the right to live. Remember what I said." The Night Watcher grabbed Ibn's collar and dragged him into the broken wall. "You're also a lunatic. If God wants to destroy someone, he must first make him crazy." This was the saying of a writer that the high priest liked. He was now in the bedroom of the temple, a room where darkness and light coexisted. It was dark all around, but there were 2 lights. One was shining on him, and the other was shining on a stone bed. Yes, only these 2 places were bright, and the rest were dark. The light didn't disperse as if it was bound by something. Therefore, even though there was light, the place that should be dark was still dark. There seemed to be something lying on the stone bed. A person, a woman. She was a woman with a body that was slightly different from that of a normal woman. There were still many scales on her body, but they were not dense. The scales seemed to be degrading, going from hard to soft, and then they began to shrink. The color gradually became transparent. Her face also began to recover from its ferocious state. The tail behind her was also shrinking little by little. The proportion of the smooth and white skin became more and more. She looked more and more like a normal person. This was Princess Yamalana, who turned into a monster in front of everyone at the banquet. After an unknown amount of time, she gradually reacted on the stone bed. Her fluttering eyelashes indicated that she was about to wake up. She opened her eyes, and her body was in a strange state. "You woke up earlier than I thought." Yamalana. The high priest was still sitting, looking down at the book in his hand. He didn't look up at the woman who was slowly getting up from the stone bed. She looked down at her own body, her own hands, and touched the scales that hadn't completely disappeared on her arms. Suddenly, she grasped her arms tightly and even pulled out the scales that were about to degenerate and disappear from her arms. Her hands were dripping with blood because of this. They will completely degenerate soon, and even if you pull them out now, new ones will grow out. The high priest said expressionlessly, "So, this kind of behavior, except for making you feel pain, has no substantial effect. Yamalana, have you forgotten what I taught you?" "Why?" She. Princess Yamalana suddenly raised her head and glared at the high priest who was under another light source. "Why did you let me do it in front of everyone?" The high priest thought for a while and said, "Everyone needs to face some unexpected and unimaginable pain in the process of growth. Pain is the food for growth. Do you know why the cactus fruit in the desert is so sweet? Because in the harsh conditions of the desert, the value of life can be more reflected. Even so, Yamalana walked down from the stone bed and staggered toward the high priest who was under another light source. But betrayal, despair, are all what you need." The high priest closed the book in his hand and said slowly, and the anger now, even hatred, "You need these, Yamalana. Without these, you're only half of what you are." She clenched her fists, and her nails dug deep into her palms. She said with a hoarse voice, "I still feel the sadness now. So, in the end, I'm just an experiment in your hands, just like my mother." You can't say that. The high priest shook his head. Your mother, strictly speaking, is also my daughter. She was actually perfect, but unfortunately, she learned to love at an early stage. Don't get me wrong, I didn't want to stop her from having the most beautiful feelings in the world. Even when she was born from your mother, I was quite happy to see it. This proved that your mother grew up very fast, beyond my expectations. I was actually very happy. Otherwise, I wouldn't allow her to marry your father. And have you? Yamalana lowered her head and said in a sad voice, didn't she die in the end? She became a monster and sand in front of our eyes. It's your mother's choice, Yamalana. The high priest stood up. I never restricted her. Even if she chose to fight against me in this way, I didn't stop her. All my love and expectations for her have been given to her, just as I have given these to you. Yamalana, you yearn for the outside world, right? You've always yearned for the outside world. Now, your chance is here again. Yamalana's body suddenly trembled. The high priestess smiled and clapped her hands. The surroundings suddenly brightened up. The room that was no longer dark finally revealed everything about it. Metal walls, metal floor. Everything here was made of metal, which looked like the crystallization of human technological civilization. Here, Yamalana looked at everything around in amazement. This was a place that even she had never been to. In front of her, there were huge multi-screen screens and consoles and all kinds of things called equipment. All of these were much more advanced than the things hidden behind the wall in the realm of gods. What's wrong? Aren't these the things you dream of? When did you build this place? Yamalana frowned, and her voice was terrifyingly deep. She has been building this place since a long, long time ago. The high priest slowly said, long before you, long before your mother. So you've been, Yamalana gritted her teeth and couldn't help but say angrily, you've been mastering so many outside technologies. Why? Why did you only give me the most ordinary things? They can't cause much damage to the giant beasts outside. You have such technology, you can attack the giant beasts more effectively. Why? Why do you watch the residents of the city of the sun usher in the longest night every year? Why do you let so many people die? So many lives. It's not important, Yamalana. The high priest shook his head. Human life will end no matter what. Dying of old age is also the end. Dying in a disaster is also the end. The process is different, but for me, the result is the same. But you're different, Yamalana. You're special. You're different from all the humans here. I've said that I've given all my love and expectations to you. Now, it's time for you to leave here. What? The high priest waved his hand, and the screen behind him suddenly flashed. Many sets of split screens finally combined into a complete image. In the corridor of the palace, the princess was walking toward the pharaoh's bedroom with her little maid. This is... Yamalana was shocked and stepped back subconsciously. She is... I've prepared a real identity for you. The high priest smiled and waved his hand again. The metal floor beside Yamalana suddenly opened, and a cylindrical table slowly rose up. There were some clothes on the table, some modern clothes. Yamalana stared at the clothes on the table in a daze. From now on, this identity officially belongs to you, the high priest said softly. You don't need to take off these clothes anymore. After leaving here, you'll be the real Claudia. As I said, this is what you've been dreaming of. Princess Yamalana subconsciously reached for the clothes on the table, the shoes. Her eyes showed that she was struggling, but she didn't say anything. At this time, a vibration came. In this metal room, this vibration wasn't obvious, but it was enough to attract the attention of the two people, especially the high priest. He turned around and looked at the screen. The image changed, and they arrived at the outside of the temple. The surroundings of the temple at night were filled with murderous intent. A figure draped in gray animal skin killed his way in. The gun in his hand spat out sparks, causing flesh and blood to fall one by one. Even though these flesh and blood belonged to the temple's white-robed guards, who were selected from hundreds of people. This is... Yamalana's expression changed slightly. The high priest thought, well, this rat finally decided to show up. It's been hiding for so long, and it seems that it can't wait any longer. As he spoke, the high priest shook his head. He opened the exit of the metal room and walked out. Before leaving, he looked at Princess Yamalana and said, "I hope that when I come back, you've already put on your clothes. I'll open the door for you to leave." The door of the metal room was closed quietly, leaving Princess Yamalana standing in front of the cylindrical platform, silently lowering her head. Her arms were still covered with blood. Palace, where Pharaoh was. The owner of the palace slowly stood up from the stairs and walked down step by step to the young guard in front of him who had listened to him talk about many things. "You seem to have made a decision," Boss Luo said calmly. Pharaoh of the palace said, "Yes. Let's start. You'll get what you want." Boss Luo waved his hand, and a sheepskin scroll appeared in front of Pharaoh of the palace. Pharaoh of the palace stared deeply at the floating sheepskin scroll in front of him. "This time, I won't." His murmurs gradually faded away. At this moment, a cat had actually stabbed his finger into his left eye and gouged it out. Chapter 1539. Ever since the night watchers broke into the temple, they had encountered more and more white-robed guards along the way. They were all weak and powerful, and even though Ibn had the divine artifact from the night watchers, he did not plan to fight against the white-robed guards. The main reason was that the divine artifact could only be used 7 times. Even if he could kill 1 white-robed guard each time, he could only kill 7 at most. That was why Ibn took advantage of the chaos and hid quietly. He only needed to watch the night watchers charge into the temple. He walked far away on the road full of corpses. From time to time, he would find some small things from the white-robed guard's clothes and put them into his pocket. He licked them all the way. Perhaps this night watcher can really kill the high priest? Suddenly, this thought appeared in Ibn's mind. Because up until now, the number of white-robed guards that had died at his hands was no less than 30. How many white-robed guards can there be in the temple? At most, there should be 100 or 80 of them. In such a short time, the Night Watcher had killed almost half of them. He has even more powerful divine artifacts. Ibn suddenly understood why the Night Watcher was so powerful. But deep in his heart, he was more and more curious about the origin of the Night Watcher. Even so, he didn't give up on the great cause of searching for the white-robed guards. Why are these guys so poor? This was the 7th corpse that Ibn didn't find anything. These white-robed guards really had nothing but a white robe. Ibn shook his head. When he was about to walk forward, his hand touched something very familiar. It was something very familiar to him and all the residents of Sun City. It was sand. Ibn looked down and was so scared that his face turned pale. At this moment, the bodies of the fallen white-robed guards from the Divine Temple were actually gradually cracking apart. Sand, their bodies actually turned into sand, and then scattered all over the ground. He was shocked and fell to the ground, but he still kicked his body to move back. In his panic, Ibn felt that he had bumped into something. When he turned around, he saw a white-robed guard standing behind him, but Ibn recognized this person. "It's you. We've entered the temple." The Night Watcher threw the rifle that was still smoking on the ground. The rifle had run out of bullets, and in this place where there was no way to reload, a rifle without bullets was not even as useful as a long sword. The white-robed guards didn't chase after them, not only because they were all killed, but also because the new army hadn't arrived yet. The Night Watcher took out 2 pistols from the holster on his waist and moved forward cautiously. However, the inside of the temple suddenly became bright. The light started from where the Night Watcher stood and moved forward step by step until it reached the end. There were no forks here, only one straight path leading to the deepest part of the temple. The Night Watcher secretly frowned and then chuckled. He looked around the passage and finally looked at a decorative stone statue in the corner of the wall. He sneered and said, "Are you going to invite me in? It's too troublesome to go out. It's better for you to come in." The voice echoed in the bright corridor. It was the voice of the high priest. The Night Watcher snorted and walked slowly along the passage. Along the way, the high priest's voice didn't appear again, and the Night Watcher didn't speak either, until he arrived at the end of the passage in front of 2 huge doors. As the doors opened, the Night Watcher's breath suddenly quickened. He even subconsciously grasped his heart. It seemed that he was in pain and his steps were a little unstable. But he quickly recovered before the two doors were fully opened. Behind the two huge doors was a brand new temple. Looking from the outside, this temple looked no different from the one outside, except that it was much smaller. This place didn't have the hot air of the desert. Instead, it was quite cool. The high priest was standing at a place where the night watcher could see with his naked eyes. The night watcher walked forward silently. He walked to the square outside the temple. But at this moment, the pistols in his hands suddenly became very heavy. They fell from his hands and fell to the ground. The sound of impact was very loud. It was the sound of metal hitting metal. Not only the pistols in his hands, but even the metal products on his body became extremely heavy. This even affected his movements. Therefore, he looked up at the high priest on the high platform and silently took off his equipment. In addition to the two pistols at the beginning, there were also two pistols for grenades, several bullets, a tactical military knife, a small metal round shield, and a folded crossbow and arrows on his back. Finally, there was a hammer. This is the domain of God. It's best not to bring in mortal weapons. The high priest said at this time, "You have quite a lot of things on you." The night watcher sneered and said, "It's just a strong electromagnet. Everyone knows that. Why do you have to play tricks here? It must have been hard on you. It must have taken you a long time to set up this place, right? And this Sun City, it's really hard on you. I need to know very clearly what everyone living here does every day, what they say, and even what they think. These are all very important materials." The high priest smiled. "You're also a scholar yourself. You should be able to understand that when you need to do some kind of research, no matter how tedious the preparatory work is, you won't feel anything special. You will even enjoy the process." "Sorry, I'm not that free." The night watcher snorted. "I've never liked the tedious process. I prefer to get the results directly. It saves me the trouble." The high priest shook his head and suddenly said, "I originally thought that you would hide for a while more. Why did you choose to come out at this time?" "I heard that an outsider came in." The night watcher sneered. "And it's an outsider who looks like your most precious test subject. So I wanted to come here to try my luck and see if I can find a way to leave. I've been preparing a way for you to leave." The high priest shook his head. "I never planned to trap you here forever. Of course, even if you can leave, I don't want to see you leave with the memories of this place. So I'll take some protective measures. It seems that we can't come to an agreement." The night watcher shook his head. "Then let's not talk about it. I believe that as long as I kill you, I should be able to figure out these things in the temple. Let's go out." After saying that, the night watcher rushed directly toward the high priest. His speed was very fast. Like a world-class sprinter, his muscle burst ability could be said to be the limit of a human body. In the blink of an eye, he had rushed in front of the high priest. With a flick of his sleeve, a dagger made of bone slid directly into his hand and stabbed toward the high priest's heart. It pierced through without any difficulty. But soon, the night watcher frowned and stopped. The bone dagger in his hand did indeed pierce through the high priest's body, but couldn't cause any damage to him, because the high priest standing in front of him didn't have a physical body. Projection? The night watcher snorted coldly and put away the dagger. He seemed to have thought of something. "It seems that every time you lure people to explore the Oasis Temple outside, it's not as simple as just replenishing the population of Sun City. Over the years, these excellent scholars have probably really created many things for you that are beyond the era outside. This is just a small part." The high priest. The high priest's projection smiled at this time. "It depends on whether you have the ability to know more. By the way, in order to reward you for being able to come here, I've specially prepared a gift for you." The night watcher seemed to feel the arrival of a crisis and squatted down subconsciously. Then a gunshot sounded. The fired bullet finally hit the outer wall of the temple and burned. If he hadn't squatted down to avoid it, the bullet would have pierced through his body. "You really have the ability to sense danger like a beast." The high priest's projection praised at this time. The night watcher didn't have time to pay attention to this projection that was useless except for talking nonsense. Instead, he stared in the direction where the bullet came from. In the distance, at another smaller entrance, two figures slowly walked in, one in front and one behind. The one walking in front was Ibn. At this time, his hands were raised high above his head, and his legs were trembling as he walked. Obviously, he was forced by someone behind him. "Sir, your most loyal servant is here to see you again," Ibn said with an ugly expression. "But your servant seems to be in some trouble. If you don't mind rescuing your servant will be very grateful. Help!" Behind Ibn, there was a man in a white robe. At this moment, he was holding a long black saber. He was pressing against Ibn's back as he walked over. The man's face gradually moved out from behind Ibn and appeared in front of the night watcher. It was Mr. Otto, who was captured by the high priest when he and Claudio were about to escape from the palace. It's a very interesting scene, isn't it? The high priest projection walked around the night watcher casually. "Do you like the gift I prepared for you?" "It's very interesting," the night watcher said indifferently. "It looks like a clown, but I'm beginning to feel bored by your bad taste." "No matter what you say." The high priest shook his head. "The way out is in the temple. If you can come in, I'll open it for you." The night watcher and the white-robed Otto, who was holding Ibn, stared at each other. Suddenly, the white-robed Otto kicked Ibn away and slashed at the night watcher with his sword. The white-robed Otto wasn't slow at all. The night watcher could only block with the bone dagger in his hand. However, the bone dagger couldn't block the long black sword in the white-robed Otto's hand. The bone dagger was instantly cut open. The long sword made a deep cut on the night watcher's gray animal skin. After that, drops of blood dripped down from the night watcher's arm. The night watcher, who had lost his weapon, was at a complete disadvantage facing the white-robed Otto. He could only dodge the white-robed Otto's attacks. "You've become hesitant," the high priest suddenly said. "It seems that even you can't maintain your usual rationality. You're really a bad person who likes to play tricks." While fighting with the white-robed Otto, the night watcher didn't respond to the high priest's words. "Play tricks?" At this time, the high priest looked at the night watchman with interest and suddenly said, "If it were you, shouldn't you believe in the existence of God more than anyone else? Because you yourself are a miracle. Every living person is a miracle that can't be replicated." The night watcher quickly said, "Only those who want to control it can't feel the beauty of the miracle and want to taint it." The high priest tilted his head and looked at the night watcher. Suddenly, he slowly exhaled and said calmly, "I want to invite you to be my companion. For so many years, you're the most charming person I've met in my life. Your appearance was beyond my expectations. Originally, I thought that you were just an ordinary scholar, but I didn't expect that the word scholar to be used on you would be an insult to you. You yourself are history, a living history. Don't reject me this time. Come with me to explore the mystery of life." Otto, the immortal king. The night watcher's body suddenly froze. At this moment, white-robed Otto's long blade chopped down, breaking open the beast's skull on his head, and a face that Ibn was familiar with immediately appeared. You? Ibn blinked, and his eyes widened. He looked back and forth between the white-robed Otto and the night watcher. "You twins." Unlike Ibn, the white-robed Otto didn't react at all after seeing the night watcher's face. He didn't even stop attacking. At the same time, facing AO20's fierce attack, the night watcher didn't dodge at all. Instead, he allowed AO20's long saber to stab into his shoulder. This kind of reckless fighting style gave the night watcher a chance to win. While grabbing the long sword that Otto stabbed into his body, the night watcher pulled out another bone dagger from his sleeve. Without any hesitation, the night watcher pierced the white-robed Otto's throat with the bone dagger. The white-robed Otto didn't show any pain. After his throat was pierced, he instantly knelt on the ground. His body gradually cracked and turned into sand. The high priest suddenly clapped his hands. As expected, no matter how many copies you make, you can't compare to the original you. You're indeed special. Siegetu, let's end the prank here. The night watcher looked up. I'm not interested in having too much interaction with you, but don't think about trapping me in this damn place. Otherwise, I'll do everything I can to turn this place into ruins. You will never know what the next step of a lunatic who has long been tormented to insanity by his long life will be. As he spoke, The night watcher pulled out the sword from his shoulder. Then, he tore his clothes and wrapped a piece of cloth around his shoulder. Then, he lifted the long black sword. Carbon fiber. No wonder. The night watcher coldly snorted and walked toward the high priest with the black sword. He walked past the high priest's projection. He didn't even look at the projection and walked into the miniature temple.